Legislature. Today is Tuesday, April 5th, 2022. It is now 5:30, and I would like to call the meeting to order. If you'll please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. Roll call of members.
Dan Klein.
Here.
Ann Corman.
Present.
Mike Lane.
Here.
Greg Mezzi.
Here.
Veronica Piller. Here. Leigh Sherlock.
Here.
Mike Sigler.
Here.
Travis Brooks.
Here.
Randy Brown.
Here.
Amanda Champion has asked to be excused. Deborah Dawson.
Here.
Henry Grandison.
Present.
Rich John.
Here.
Shauna Black.
Here.
We have 13 members present.
Thank you, Kathy. We would like to start off by doing our proclamations this afternoon. And can I just say, it is so nice to have people in the chambers today. You don't realize how much you miss our fans and having people in these chambers, because the noise bounces off the walls. And at one point there were only 3 or 4 of the legislators here, and we felt like we were talking to ourselves. So welcome to everyone, and thank you for coming out tonight. Let's start off with our first proclamation, which is the Public Safety Telecommunications Week. And we do have Michael Steitley and Jeff Dunn that are here to receive the proclamation. So whereas emergencies can occur at any time that require police, fire, or emergency medical services, and whereas where an emergency occurs, the prompt response of police officers, firefighters, and paramedics is critical to the protection of life and preservation of property, and whereas the safety of our police officers, firefighters, EMTs, and paramedics is dependent upon the quality and accuracy of information obtained from residents who dial 911 and the Tompkins County Emergency Communications Center, and whereas public safety telecommunicators are the first responders and most critical contact our residents have with emergency services, and whereas public safety telecommunicators are the single vital link for our police officers, firefighters, EMT, and paramedics by monitoring their activities by radio, providing them information, and ensuring their safety, and whereas public safety telecommunicators of the Tompkins County Department of Emergency Response have contributed substantially to the apprehension of criminals, suppression of fires, and treatment of patients. And whereas Tompkins County adopted 911 in 1997 and registered its 1 millionth call on February 23rd, 2022. Now, therefore, I, Shauna Black, Chairwoman of the Tompkins County Legislature, do hereby proclaim April 10th through the 16th, 2022 as Public Safety Telecommunicators Week in Tompkins County, in honor of the men and women whose diligence, understanding, compassion, and professionalism during the performance of their job keep our county and its citizens safe. In witness whereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused to be affixed the Great Seal of Tompkins County, State of New York, on this 5th day of April, 2022. And Michael Steitley, would you like to say a few words?
Just want to thank you,
Let me stand at the podium, sorry.
Chairwoman Black and the rest of the legislature for this beautiful proclamation. I'm here accepting this today on behalf of the entire 911 center and the staff there. I know are very proud of this, and this will be hung in the 911 center tomorrow morning. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, next we have Library Week in Tompkins County, and we have Teresa Vadigan, who is here to accept the proclamation. Whereas libraries are accessible and inclusive places that foster a sense of connection and build community, and whereas libraries connect people to technology, providing access to broadband internet, computers, and training that are critical for assessing education and employment opportunities. And whereas libraries offer opportunities for everyone to connect with new ideas and become their best selves through access to multimedia content, programs, and classes in addition to books. And whereas today's libraries and their services extend far beyond the four walls of a building and everyone is welcome to use their resources. And whereas in times of crisis, libraries and library professionals play an invaluable role to supporting their communities both in person and virtually. And whereas libraries strive to develop and maintain programs and collections that are as diverse as the populations they serve and ensure equity of access for all. And whereas to adapt to a changing world, libraries are expanding their resources and continuing to meet the needs of their patrons. And whereas libraries have long served as trusted and treasured institutions for all members of the community, regardless of race, ethnicity, creed, ability, sexual orientation, gender identity, and socioeconomic status. And whereas libraries are cornerstones of democracy, promoting the free exchange of information and ideas for all. And whereas the Tompkins County Public Library staff, as well as the staff of the rural libraries in Dryden, Groton, Lansing, Newfield, and Trumansburg provide essential community services, space, and resources to the people of Tompkins County. Now, therefore, I, Shauna Black, Chairwoman of the Tompkins County Legislature, do hereby proclaim April 3rd through the 9th, 2022 as Library Week in Tompkins County, and encourages all county residents to take advantage of this wonderful community resource. In witness whereof, I have hereunto set my hand and cause to be affixed the Great Seal of Tompkins County, State of New York, on this 5th day of April, 2022. I would love for you, yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here to accept this proclamation for all the Tompkins County libraries. I did let them know we were coming here today, and I shared the proclamation with them, the directors, and they were so happy. I see on a daily basis what libraries do for the community. Just recently, we did a Why I Love My Library campaign, and we found out libraries are used for many things, whether it be homeschooling their children, getting a job. I still have a patron that calls me yearly to thank me for helping him get his job. And he calls yearly. One year he brought donuts. But I see the effects that we have on the community. And I really want to thank all the library staff for all that they do on a daily basis. The last 2 years has been difficult, but we have been resilient, and it's really modified our services, but I think in a really good way. So I really thank you, Legislator, for your support of our library. Just recently, we opened Sundays again, and we thank you for that. Last week, we had 495 people come through those doors on a Sunday. So thank you for everything that you do for the libraries.
Teresa. And next is Fair Housing Month in Tompkins County. And we are joined by Josh Adams, Norma Jane, Amy Little, and we also have Paul Rossi here. So I would like to read the proclamation. Whereas the Fair Housing Act enacted on April 11th, 1968, enshrined into federal law the goal of eliminating racial segregation and ending housing discrimination in the United States. And whereas the Fair Housing Act prohibits discrimination in housing based on race, color, religion, sex, status, national origin, and disability, and commits recipients of federal funding to affirmatively further fair housing in their communities. And whereas Tompkins County is committed to the mission and intent of Congress to provide fair and equal housing opportunities for, and whereas our social fabric, the economy, health, and environment are strengthened in diverse, inclusive communities. And whereas more than 50 years after the passage of the Fair Housing Act, discrimination persists and many communities remain segregated. And whereas acts of housing discrimination and barriers to equal housing opportunities are repugnant to a common sense of decency and fairness. Now, therefore, I, Shauna Black, Chairwoman of the Tompkins County Legislature, do hereby proclaim the month of April 2022 as Fair Housing Month in Tompkins County as an inclusive community committed to fair housing and to promoting appropriate activities by private and public entities to provide and advocate for equal housing opportunities for all residents and prospective residents of Tompkins County. In witness whereof, I have hereto set my hand and caused the great seal of the County of Tompkins to be affixed this 5th day of April in the year of 2022. Paul Rossi.
I was not prepared to say anything tonight, but I want to thank you all for being the best county legislature in New York State. Without question. For the record now, that will live on. I don't say that to every county. Your caring and your conversation in all of your committees, because I watch all of them, you're amazing and you really care. And I'm so proud that I get to cover you for the New York State Association of Realtors. It's an honor. And thank you all very much for what you do.
Thank you, Paul. We've certainly missed you and hearing your positive comments about the legislature over the past 2 years now. So glad to see you back. Okay, next I will be announcing our executive session. We will be discussing 3 topics this evening for executive session: contract negotiations, 2 conversations on contract negotiations, and litigation as well. We are not expected to take any action this evening after executive session. Now let's move to privilege of the floor. Let's see here. For the public, do we have Mr. Zachary Nguyen?
Good evening. Can you hear me?
A little bit. Can you speak a little bit louder?
Is this better?
Yeah.
Good evening. Recently, council legislator, excuse me, Rich John published an editorial in the Ithaca Times encouraging people to move forward with the reimagining public safety process. And recently, councilperson Cynthia Brock also wrote an editorial pointing out that there's been a number of deviations from what would be normal procedure from the beginning, and there are outside forces with some sort of interest in this process moving forward who are not here to suffer the consequences of that reimagination. It's understood that there's been at least 8 sheriffs who have departed, similar number, 7, I believe, at Ithaca Police Department. And there are a lot of questions about, what exactly the Center for Policing Equity, the People for the American Way, and the Open Society Foundation are doing, meddling, some would say having instigated the process to begin with, taking things well outside the purview of what was laid out by the governor with his executive order, and using this as Svante has said, as some sort of experiment in democracy. And the reality is that everyday people in this town are being experimented on with a very radical and unnecessary police reform that is really causing people to quit, which was the stated goal of the rioting and protesting of 2020. So I would encourage you to just pump the brakes on this entire thing. Talk to the true stakeholders here, who are the police, and thank you very much. I was also going to speak about the looming global food crisis and how best you guys could get ahead of coping with that, but I guess that'll have to wait till next month. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Zach. Anyone else here for public comment? I see none. Next, let's move on to municipal officials. I see Mr. Robert Lynch here in our audience.
Good evening. Robert Lynch, 175 Gray Road, Town of Enfield, councilperson on the Enfield Town Board. First, the most important thing. We are flying the Ukrainian flag under Old Glory over our town hall right now. Supervisor Stephanie Redmond was able to locate a flag, and I believe as of last Friday, we started flying the Ukrainian flag, and we're very proud of that. The main reason I came here tonight is because of an initiative that we're coming up with in Enfield, and it will require your legislature's approval and consent, as well as the state legislature. It's a work in progress. We haven't adopted anything yet, but at our forthcoming meeting on April 13th, the board will discuss and likely act upon a resolution that I believe, and I sense our town board believes, will assist us in the recruitment and retention of volunteer firefighters and EMT personnel. We have a problem in Enfield with too few people volunteering for the Enfield Volunteer Fire Company and its rescue squad, and we're trying to solve that problem. Last December 1st, Governor Hochul signed a law that permitted Monroe County to provide a 10% real estate tax exemption to volunteer firefighter or emergency workers who have been part of a volunteer organization within that county, Monroe County, for at least 2 years. And as far as I know, Tompkins County doesn't have a similar law on the books. I'm told sections of the New York real property tax law permit this type of exemption to some limited extent. There's a $3,000 limit. I won't get into the details, but there is some break on that system for that exemption. But it's a good exemption, and we'd like to have it here. At present, neighboring Seneca County is actively considering a similar exemption law. It cleared committee on March 22nd and will go before the full Seneca County Board of Supervisors on April 12th. One of our county's 3 state senators, Pam Helming, has been instrumental in that initiative and has aided Seneca County in its efforts. Seneca County, as we're told by Senator Helming's office, is not the only county considering it. Ontario County is considering such an exemption, and I'm told that Cayuga County either may have adopted it or is in discussion right now. An exemption requires state legislative approval and the governor's signature under the state's home rule law, and because of that, it has to go through, as I understand it, Tompkins County's government to go on to the state. Supervisor Stephanie Redmond has tasked me with writing the Enfield resolution, which I will do, and I hope we will act on it a week from tomorrow. And we will then bring it to the appropriate county committees and hopefully the full county legislature. If sought by your legislator, approved by the state, this exemption would not just benefit Enfield, but every volunteer fire company in Tompkins County, whether it be Dryden or Groton or Danby or Trumansburg, wherever. I know these initiatives, because you're cutting the assessment for some, might raise the taxes a trifle for others. But I think that's a small price to pay for the benefits that you derive and by having a better, well-staffed volunteer fire service in this community. And face it, it would cost a lot more if we, the rural communities, had to fund with our tax dollars a paid fire department, or we had to contract with the city of Ithaca for fire services. So consider this. We'll get back in touch with you, but I wanted to give you a heads up on this tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. We actually have some questions for you, if you would be open to that. Okay, we have Deborah Dawson and then Rich John.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. This is a very interesting idea. Can you clarify for me, do the volunteer fire departments also provide EMT services?
Some provide them. It depends on the volunteer fire company. We in Enfield don't provide a full ambulance service. We just provide a rescue squad, but we do have EMTs and what are called, I believe, certified or licensed first responders, which is a lesser class of emergency responder. And for example, in Enfield, if there's an accident or a medical emergency, Bang's ambulance is dispatched to the location, but also our volunteer squad often gets there before Bang's ambulance does, and helps provide first responder services.
Thank you.
Depends on the department.
Thank you.
Rich John.
Thanks for bringing this subject up. This idea of the tax exemption actually has been raised. We've had some discussion about it. The concerns I have, and by the way, I of course represent a city district and we have fire protection through a paid service, paid force. But with that said, I agree with you completely that the towns and villages are heading towards real crisis in their EMT service and in their firefighters. We should be thinking about doing something. The concerns I have with that proposal is it really only applies to those who own real property. And we would probably be not providing much benefit to, say, very young volunteers who don't yet have a chance to buy property. And you also have a disconnect that you have tax status day once a year. And so you'd have people who quit and would be getting a tax exemption through the rest of the time, depending on when they left their volunteer service. So I don't know if that's the way to do it. But I think we as a county should be thinking about, is there a way that we can be of more assistance to the rural firefighters? Because, yeah, agree completely, the work's really important. Thanks.
We're racking our brain in Enfield as to how to solve the problem. We have had some initial discussions about what some may know as the LOSAP program, which is to provide retirement benefits for some volunteer firefighters. The problem is that's difficult when you're trying to recruit young people because they're not really interested in retirement if they're 25 years old. However, they may own a home. They may own property. I think in Enfield, a lot of people are homeowners to a certain extent as opposed to renters. And that may provide just a little more of a benefit when finances get tight for people to say, maybe this is a reason to volunteer. And I think there is, I know in Monroe County, I read the governor's statement in signing that law, and it said there had to be a 2-year volunteer commitment. In other words, you had to have records of service for 2 years in that volunteer company to qualify. So I think you just can't come in, get the tax exemption, and then quit and still get that exemption. There's probably some stipulations there that are written into the law. And of course, you know, anything that we come up with in Enfield will be a recommendation, and Mr. Troy can go through it and dot all the I's and cross all the T's. Yes.
Ann Gorman.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks, Bob, for bringing this topic up. I do agree, of course, that there has been and is continuing to be a big issue. I would prefer, you know, I've been thinking about this for a while and talking to different departments, and I prefer to figure something out that's more equitable to everybody. So, for instance, some of the ideas I've heard are maybe better reimbursement for training, uniforms, maybe paid some type of compensation for the folks when they get their training. So anyway, I'd like to look at something that figure out some way that was very equitable to everybody. Thank you.
Greg Mezzi.
Again, thanks for bringing this topic up. It's always good when there's something meaty we can talk about, so I appreciate that. Is there good data out there on the intended effect of this, whether it be retention, recruitment? Has it been done anywhere else where you can point to say, this does make a difference, and here's what this department was before, and here's what this department is now? And I guess I'm just curious if when we get to that conversation at the legislative level, I'd like to see what is out there that we can sort of look back to the success of other areas, maybe outside of New York even too.
I don't have the data with me tonight. I think that Senator Helming is a point person on this. She's been a big advocate of it. Her office has just had the initial discussions with me regarding Enfield's involvement. I presume we can dig deeper into this and see what the success rate has been. But I know that Monroe County was very enthusiastic about it. Maybe they've got some data that I can access. They were kind of, at least in recent times, they've been the lead in this, and there was a lot of promotion for that, and that's one of the reasons it reached the headlines.
Leigh Sherlock.
Let me weigh in. To several points, Bob, I'm glad you're bringing this forward because it does have a very direct impact on the cost to local taxpayers throughout Tompkins County, throughout the state. And to Greg's point, one of the challenges is, and for those, some of you may know, I just ended a term as president of the New York State Association of Fire Chiefs and have worked in the government affairs angle with the fire service for more years than I want to admit to. You guys think I'm young, but I'm not. The recruitment and retention has been a theme for as long as I can remember. And just 2 years ago, the legislature passed a bill that would create a statewide retention and recruitment task force. And with some of the issues related to COVID and the change in administrations, the appointments to this task force have been slow and happening. They've begun to meet and take a look at it. Frankly, I'm concerned about the appointments because it does not reflect a diverse base of people that are looking at the solutions. To be blunt about it, there's a bunch of us old white guys that have been trying to solve the problem for 20 years, and they're filling the task force with a bunch of veterans that, you know, we need to look a little bit beyond that. To Ann's point, looking at a broad spectrum is probably what the answer is going to be. Going back to when I was fire chief in Groton, and that again is a few years ago, there was on the books a property tax exemption that the village employed, and it was based on a $500 break on the assessed value of a village home. Now, if you go back into the 1960s and 70s, $500 on partial tax assessments, or what the rate ever was at the time, we weren't at full value then, that was substantial. And the conflict arose when the state implemented an income tax credit that now volunteers can receive. It's $250. It's a good number when you're doing your income taxes, and does apply to anybody that's paying income tax. And it created a conflict in that you couldn't claim both. So we took that exemption off the books in the village of Groton so that we wouldn't cause a conflict with those that could take it on a personal income tax and actually get a credit rather than a reduction in the assessment. And then however many dollars per thousand, it worked out to about $25 a year, I think is what it was. Moving forward, there's two angles. We're trying to recruit among the younger folks. They don't always own property. It may not have a benefit to them, but our success out in the rural area where I am has been in going to the new homeowners coming into town. So I wouldn't want to rule this out. The other part is that what has been intriguing about the Monroe County example was that when they put the state legislation together, it not only enabled the tax exemption to happen at the county level, but it extends that ability for every local government in Monroe County, as I understand it, including school districts, to take advantage of it. Now, this would be a substantial recruitment and retention tool for those who settle in the communities, suburban, rural, where have you. If it applied to all property taxes across the board, you might very well have a mechanism that would entice some longer term residents to be part of this. But, you know, it's a piece of many things. And I would hope that we would look at the full gamut and not necessarily rule this out or rule it in, but it's the first property tax exemption that I've seen that has a potential to be of value for volunteers. And to Deborah's question, every single fire department in Tompkins County does provide emergency medical services. And as Bob stated, almost all of them are first response rescue squads. Groton Fire Department still has an ambulance service that transports. Trumansburg is now a municipal service. Dryden has a not-for-profit that's affiliated with the Dryden Fire Department, very much involved. And we did lose 2 fire department ambulance squads in Slaterville and Lansing in the last 20 some years. Whereas many years ago, there were a lot more in the area. So there's a lot there to look at, but we also, and I'm sorry, Michael wasn't here for the discussion. We've been providing some history as he's getting adjusted. At one point in time, we had over 1,800 volunteers in Tompkins County in the fire departments. That number was down about 5 years ago to between 500 and 600. And the volume of calls, Michael may mention of the million E911 calls mark that we've hit this year since the service has been in. The number of fire and EMS responses has gone from about 5,000 to I'm trying to think what the number is. Somewhere in the 20,000 range in just 20 years time. So those fewer volunteers are doing far more calls today, and recruitment and retention is key to keeping that component. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Leigh. I know I've said this more than once, but it's really nice to have your experience here as part of the legislature. Mike Lane.
Very briefly, I just want to thank Bob for bringing this forward. Firemen and firefighters rather from the Neptune Host Company approached me about this issue several weeks ago, and we passed it on, and that's what's generated the discussion that we've had in Rich's Public Safety Committee and other things. So this means a lot, trying to figure out how to get more people involved in volunteer services, and they're wonderful. They're wonderful service for our communities. They are beloved in our communities, and we hope that this or some other method like this will help add numbers of people to the rosters.
Thank you, Mike. Any other questions or comments for Bob Lynch?
I think we will adopt our resolution, or I presume the board will adopt the resolution. I've gotten some initial indications of support from the supervisor. And then we'll put it before your county committees and we'll see if we can come up with a creative solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob, for joining us. Okay, next we have Rod Howe from the town of Ithaca. Hello, Rod.
Hello. Clearly, I need somebody to work on lighting issues at my home. The goal is to have a brief Town of Ithaca report 4 times a year. So 2 times this year, you'll see me, and 2 times it will be our Deputy Supervisor, Rich DiPaolo. I'd like to say we are honored that your chair is prominently, although not permanently, displayed with her family on the outside of Ithaca Town Hall as part of the Spirit of a Tompkins initiative. Now on to just a smattering of updates. TCOG, obviously the county hears different topics that TCOG, Tompkins County Council of Governments, is working on. There is an energy committee. We've decided this year, and there's representation from the county on that committee. We've decided this year to focus on electrification, that as we move toward more of our energy coming from electricity, the infrastructure may not be in place to really handle that. So how do we take and look at that issue, not just one municipality at a time? So it's a big issue. We don't really know what the answers are, but that's what the TCOG Energy Committee is going to focus in on this year. Trails, parks, and preserves, those are very important to the town, as are pedestrian and biking corridors. We're working on connecting and extending our trails, often, usually in partnership with other municipalities. And of course, there's interest in additional sidewalks in the town. So our planning committee is working to develop a prioritized list of sidewalks so that we're ready for funding opportunities when they come down the pike. Short-term rentals, after several years, we adopted a new short-term rentals law at the end of 2021, and applications are now available on our website for that. We sincerely hope that we're going to be able to work with the county to have access to some basic information for those households offering short-term rentals. So I believe we're waiting to hear an answer from the county, what kind of data will be available to the sister municipalities. So we hope for good news on that front. Green New Deal, we continue to work on issues. We now own our streetlights. This summer sometime, the light bulbs will be converted to LEDs. The green fleet policy, we have that just as I believe the county does. I've had conversations with Terry Carroll. There's some challenges right now to accessing vehicles, period, but especially green policies. So, but we're working on that. And we recently had an energy audit done. Obviously, we have a historic old building, town hall. We had an energy audit done to see what can we do to increase our energy efficiency in that building. It will take us many years. Some of the items are fairly pricey. We're hoping that there might be funding out there for historic buildings to be more sustainable and more green. And there are some updates that we want to make to our public works facility as well from an energy perspective. You know, usually I take pride in that I'm just part of Tompkins County, you know, and we're all in this together, but I'm particularly proud that this is in the town of Ithaca. So the Dalai Lama Library and Learning Center, the groundbreaking ceremony will be later in April. And it's just so neat that of all the places in the world, the Dalai Lama Learning Center and Library could be, it's in the town of Ithaca. Inlet Valley, so the area between our two state parks, Buttermilk and Robert Treeman, we're developing some new zoning overlays. We'd really like to encourage more economic development, but we're being pretty careful about what kind of economic development we want to see happen in that corridor. So stay tuned on that. You know, the county, I think, has had lots of appreciation and gratitude expressed for hosting the regular calls during COVID. So I want to just say thank you again, and we're pleased that we've gone to monthly check-ins now. And of course, COVID will still probably be a topic for a while, but we're bringing other issues to that. So they've been enormously helpful and beneficial. And it spurred the supervisors, the town supervisors, to meet monthly as well. So that's also been of great use. Let's see, OpenGov. So we are almost ready to unveil a new online platform for both town residents and staff related to applying and tracking permits and projects. It's a pretty robust platform. We think it will allow us to provide services even better and for residents to track their projects and where we are with different permits. And I believe that some other municipalities are moving to work with OpenGov in Tompkins County as well. We are almost ready to unveil a new website. I've been embarrassed by the town's website. So probably in about a month, you'll see a new website. And we also have a new mission and vision statement. I'm not prepared to tell you what it is, but it will be prominent on our new website. And I haven't had a chance to congratulate Lisa Holmes. So Lisa, congratulations on being county administrator. And I look forward to working with you. So this was just meant to be a smattering. Any questions for me?
Any questions for Rod Howe, town of Ithaca? I don't see any, Rod. Thank you very
Donna,
much.
When we take you off from town hall, we'll see if you want it.
That sounds great. I'll put it right up in our living room. My wife will appreciate that.
Or in your office here.
Or in my office. Yes. Thank you so much, Rod, for joining us.
Take care.
Okay, next is George Mcgonagall from the city of Ithaca. Welcome, George.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Good. So I too would like to congratulate Lisa Holmes. Congratulations, Lisa. I look forward to working with you as we have in the past. City has a busy Common Council agenda this month. The meeting is tomorrow. We are getting on the last legs of enclosing the Cass Park rink, the ice skating rink at Cass Park. We hope to do that this summer. The bids were out and they came in about $400,000 more than we have budgeted. So we're going to vote tomorrow on whether or not to add $400,000 to the capital project. I think we'll do that. This is a really good project and the rink will be available for considerably longer period of time every year and be much more energy efficient. The dehumidifying component is going to be all electric to keep in line with Green New Deal. Also tomorrow, we're going to vote on supporting state legislation that would allow us to reduce the speed limit in the city to 25 miles an hour, generally speaking, and also would allow us to reduce it to 20 miles an hour on certain streets that really need to be slower. Also, it would allow us to retain 30 miles per hour on certain streets. But generally speaking, it would be 25 miles an hour in the city. And I think there's general support for that. We're going to vote on spending some money to study the flooding issues around Hangar Theater, which is an annual problem. We're going to try to decide with expert help on whether or not it's really feasible to keep the Hangar Theater where it is. We are going to apply for, or vote to apply for, a Mammoth grant from the federal government surrounding flood control on all three of our big creeks, Fall Creek, Cascadilla, and 6 Mile Creek. As you may know, the flood maps, the new flood maps are out, and they cover a much larger part of the city than the old maps did, and this is going to have an effect on people's home owners insurance. So we're going to try to mitigate that. Two things are coming from the planning committee. A proposed ordinance that would change the minimum amount of time renters have to decide whether or not they're going to continue their lease or not. Currently, it's only 60 days between the time you begin your rental agreement and the time that you'll need to decide whether you're going to renew or not. It's only 60 days, and we plan on voting to change that to 120 days. And that proposal was brought forward by our new council member from the 4th Ward. And he's going to be here in 2 weeks to talk to you. And I'm blanking on his name. Can anybody help me?
Patrick Mailer.
Yes, thank you very much. Just to show I still have old timers disease. Finally, the bridge to nowhere, the footbridge at the south end of the city that's kind of straddles the city and the town border. which for years has been called the Bridge to Nowhere. We're going to vote to rename that in honor of Kirby Edmonds, the well-known local leader who passed away 2 years ago. Kirby did big things for the city over the course of decades, and so we want to honor him, and now it's going to be a bridge to somewhere, and it's going to be called the Kirby Edmonds Bridge. That's all I've got.
Thank you, George. We have some questions. Rich, John?
George, thanks for coming. Always appreciate your report. I'm very happy to hear two items that you talked about. One is the Kirby Edmonds Bridge. I was fortunate to get to work with Kirby at the Tompkins Center for History and Culture, and he really stepped in at a critical point and helped that project move forward. That's a great way to recognize his contribution to our community over many, many years. So wonderful. The other is Cass Park. I sure hope you guys go forward with that project. I believe you're going to end up with a far more functional, energy efficient, and useful public amenity with the rink closed in. And frankly, not just a rink, but a very, very large public space closed in that could be used for lots of things in the summer too. Good news.
Any other questions for George? Or George, would you like to comment?
One more thing. We will begin our discussions tomorrow about the first recommendation in the 19 recommendations of police reimagining. This is the recommendation that is solely related to the city and calls for restructuring of the police department. And we will begin those discussions tomorrow. There probably will be an additional meeting, committee of the whole meeting. It looks like that may be on April 15th, in which that topic will be the only thing we discuss.
Thank you, George. We have questions from Veronica Piller and Ann Corman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, George. I also wanted to say, like Rich, I'm really happy about the Kirby Edmonds Bridge naming. I only knew him very slightly, but his really, really respect and admire his contribution to just work on justice and equity in the county. One of my first introductions to him was when he gave a TED Talk at a TEDx conference here, talking about the poverty pump and how it operates in the county. And that's on YouTube. I'd encourage anyone to take a look. The other thing, I guess I could listen tonight, but do you have any more knowledge of what you're planning to do with the grant about flood control if you were to get it? Because this is a thing a lot of people have been rather stressed about.
To the best of my knowledge, it would involve several different flood mitigation projects that could include building up the banks of the creeks and some other things as well. A variety of things, and it would be used over all three of the creeks. I can try to get you more information about specifics if you'd like. I think that's kind of evolving at this point in time.
I'll ask you 5 questions after your meeting tomorrow. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Next, we have Ann Corman and then Mike Sigler.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, George, for coming today again to give us an update. I had one specific question regarding, you talked about people who are renting and their ability to a certain time frame that they have to decide whether they want to renew their lease. And I wasn't sure, it kind of sounded like you said from when they start their lease, they have 60 days to decide if they want to renew it for the next year. I guess I'm not clear about that.
Well, I didn't explain it very well. Currently, the statute on the books allows a landlord to ask a tenant whether they plan on renewing their lease after 60 days. So as a consequence, like for college students, for example, if they sign a lease in, say, for the 1st of June, the landlord would have the right to start showing that apartment 60 days later if those tenants didn't let them know that they were going to renew the lease. So obviously there's certain problems with that. And the proposal before us tomorrow is to change the 60-day minimum to a 120-day minimum, a 4-month, basically, period of time.
Yeah, okay. To me, it just sounds backwards that I was hoping we were going to say that it was 60 days at the end of, before their lease ended, and you were going to extend that to 120 days so they had more time to think about it. But you're talking about this is at the beginning of their lease.
Correct.
That's kind of hard to make those decisions.
Right.
It seemed to me. Okay, thank you.
Mike Segler?
Hi, George. I was just curious about the speed limit. I mean, is the city planning to step up enforcement of that speed limit, or it's one thing to set a speed limit?
Well,
Got to laugh at George, which is always a good thing.
yeah. Well, believe it or not, we have a hard time having enough police officers to enforce speed limits currently. But maybe if we drop the signs to 25 miles an hour, people will go by my house on Hector Street at 45 instead of 55. I think this is a good thing, and hopefully enforcement will get better. But particularly downtown, on flats, in residential neighborhoods, this will be a good thing, in my opinion.
Okay. And by the way, George, the reason why people go 55 is because we have electric cars and they're regenerating on the way down. So.
Oh, okay.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, sorry. Next is.
Well,
Greg.
honk your horn when you go by, will you?
I certainly will. Don't give me a special wave, will you? Greg Mezzi?
Yeah, thanks, George. Always appreciate the city update. Just a quick question on the 60-day notice versus 120-day notice. I think there's, correct me if I'm wrong, there's an ability for a tenant to waive that 60-day right. Does the new proposed legislation eliminate the ability to have that 120-day notice waived?
No, the waiver is in the new proposal, so it could be waived.
Okay.
That continues.
And I just had one question in regards to the dredging of the inlet. Do we know if that's happening anytime soon? I know that the grant funds at some point are not going to be available if it's not done, and just wanted to check in on the time frame for that.
At the risk of being a liar, I'm going to say that that's going to happen soon.
Okay. Well, thank you. Next is Greg Mezzi.
Yes, sorry, George, that actually came up in a conversation. So Shauna, thanks for the reminder and bringing that up. Is there any way that you could follow up with the legislature? If you have more conversation around that, when that's going to be happening, so we could update our constituents on that? The dredging specifically of the inlet.
Follow up.
Yes, I'd be happy to do that. I'll call Mike Thorne tomorrow and I'll relay what I learned to the legislature.
That'd be great. Thank you so much.
And that might also help with some of the flooding issues that are happening on that end.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Next is Rich John.
Yeah, just an update. I have an email from Duxon on the dredging issue. And he indicates that the dewatering facility is completed. And in fact, I saw it recently. I had a chance to look at it. It's a pretty impressive, very, very large space where my understanding is they're going to put the spoils in big bags and the water will run out the bottom. But the city and NISDEC are waiting for environmental permits. And I think New York State DEC is waiting for permits from itself, in fact. But then they will put the dredging work out for bid, and maybe in 2023, they'll be able to start work. So we are not going to see it this season, it sounds like. Is that your understanding, George? I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
No, I thought it was going to happen this year, but your information sounds like it's more recent than mine. But the site is ready.
Okay, George, any other questions for George? Okay, I don't see any. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you very much.
Next, let's move on to privilege of the floor for legislators. Ann Corman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of notes here. I wanted to first off just acknowledge the ongoing war in Ukraine and say that again, as we've said before, my heart and prayers go out to people in Ukraine, people that have become now refugees, people in this country who are Ukrainian or who have family and friends there. Second, I wanted to thank Mcgonagall Lyons from our team Jedi, which is the Justice, Equity, and Diversity and Inclusion team, as she was at the conservatory in Trumansburg this weekend with a tabling at a Martin Luther King event. So she was talking to, it was very well attended, and she had a lot of different information to give out, including a video that was really great video that was done by the youth. And so I wanted to thank her for doing that, and for Team Jedi and your department, Deanna, for making that happen. And let's see, and I got to meet her beautiful family too. So that was nice. I want to thank I think it was the health department that put out these COVID safety tips that we got in the mail and through our PR department. This was really to the point, very informative. So when I get these things, I try and pretend I don't know anything, and it's just like, okay, this is great information. So thank you for doing that. And just always like to, when I'm in a meeting like this, just to remind folks that it's okay if people want to continue to wear masks. You don't know, I don't have to have a reason. I mean, I do happen to have asthma. I do happen to have a brother who is struggling with cancer, but I could just, for whatever reason. And so I just want to put that out there, because I have been myself asked a few times and, encouraged strongly, take your mask off by other people. And so please, I'm just asking people, please don't do that. Please just respect that. Or maybe think about maybe why you feel uncomfortable. I'd be willing to talk to people about that, but it's just kind of uncomfortable when people do that. I heard that Lisa Holmes is moved into her new office, her new administrator office. I saw that on Facebook. And so thank to your administration staff who made that happen while you were on vacation. And just one quick question. Is there a karaoke machine in there yet?
I already asked her that.
Oh, you did?
Not yet, but there was a strobe light.
Strobe light. Okay, so let us know when the karaoke machine comes so that we can come over and listen to you singing. And that's all I had. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Ann. Dan Klein.
Yeah, I wanted to mention that TCAP Board of Directors voted on a new policy that will take effect at the end of next month, which is free bus fares for all youth. The current policy was that youth up to 5 were free and that 5 to 17 were half price. And then this new policy will make free fare for all youth up to age 17. It turns out that it's not a huge impact on the TCAP budget. It represents about 1% of the ridership, that demographic. But it's a really positive step. We're thinking of it as sort of training and encouraging the next generation of bus riders. And perhaps someday, and maybe not that far in the future, we will move to an all fare-free system. It's possible, and that this would be kind of a first step towards that. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Dan. Veronica Piller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am happy to hear all three proclamations that were given today. I wanted to say a little bit about the fair housing one. We've got this a line in it saying, whereas more than 50 years after the passage of the Fair Housing Act, discrimination persists and many communities remain segregated. And I don't know if we always are aware of all the ways that shows up. I'm certainly not. But even with the Fair Housing Act enshrined in law, we see discrimination in the form within Tompkins County of evictions and non-renewals of folks who are disproportionately Black and brown, disproportionately disabled, or living at the intersection of those identities. We see tenants of housing complexes supposed to be offered disability accommodations in some cases that aren't necessarily. We see, through no one's intentional fault, it says here the Fair Housing Act prohibits discrimination based on familial status, and we've got people in families of certain sizes who just struggle to find somewhere to live, not perhaps because anyone's keeping them out, but because there just aren't a lot of units that can fit a lot of people. And so at the end, we say we want to promote appropriate activities by private and public entities to provide and advocate for equal housing opportunities for all residents and prospective residents of Tompkins County. So I just like, us in and outside the county legislature to keep all these things in mind. And maybe April is a good month to shine more light on some of these issues.
Thank you, Veronica. Deb Dawson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So last Monday night, it was March 28th, I think, I tuned into a presentation that Ken Clark and the Office of Human Rights put on about critical race theory. And if you missed it, I hope it's recorded and somewhere on YouTube. It was exceptionally well done, really informative. And I learned a lot. So hats off to the Office of Human Rights and Ken Clark and the two very erudite gentlemen who did the presentation. Thanks.
Thank you, Deb. We have Mike Lane and then Veronica.
Adding to what Ann said, the news out of Ukraine is pretty scary when it comes to the humanitarian issues there. Beyond the destruction is the murder of people. We've seen that. I would just commend to folks here and anywhere to take a look at the old movie called Judgment at Nuremberg, about what happened after the Nazis were defeated. And the leaders and the war criminals were tried. And I think that we need to keep that in mind as we're seeing bad things happen in Ukraine. But my hat's off to the Ukrainian people for standing up for their democracy and having some successes. On a much happier note, I wanted to say that I just received a letter, I think some of us received it, from the New York State Town Clerks Association. And I'll just read the first sentence of it. The New York State Town Clerks Association is pleased to announce that at its 40th annual banquet, Bambi L. Avery, Town Clerk of the town of Dryden in Tompkins County, will be sworn in as president of the association representing and serving the needs of 933 town clerks across New York State. Bambi Avery does a wonderful job as our town clerk in the town of Dryden, and we're very proud of this and proud of her for having this honor and doing this job.
Congratulations to Bambi. It's a big achievement and we appreciate her service. Next, we have Veronica Piller.
Thank you. Just a quick follow-up to Deb's thing about the critical race theory presentation. It is recorded on YouTube, which I'm glad of because I missed it at the time. And there's a part 2 coming up on, I believe it's Wednesday, April 13th. I think at 7 p.m.
Great. Thanks, Veronica. Ann Corman.
Thanks for letting me speak again. Yes, so the presentation on critical race theory, I'm just going to say just one more quick thing about it. It was a nice primer, like if you don't know anything about it, and I thought I knew some about it, and they just really went into detail. So I encourage everybody, to look at that, like what's the history behind it? What does it mean? What is actually being taught in law school? What is being taught in school? So it really helped me get information on that. And I forgot to mention one other thing. I've been meeting with some of the organizations in my community, and I met with the rural libraries this week to let them know that if what we do know about the Community Recovery Fund. And so some of the feedback that I've been getting back is that to make sure that we keep it as broad as possible. All organizations were consistent on saying funding for different things are in these really narrow silos. And so one of the things was, for instance, broadband. There's a lot of things right now for broadband if you can take advantage of it. And then, that disappears. So it's good to have, so they were imploring us to keep it as broad as possible. And they also said universally, make it less cumbersome for the application process and the reporting process. One example for a small, I think it was what I thought was relatively small, like a $20,000 loan or grant that through one organization, they had to fill out just the financial section was 38 pages. So, and with organizations that have very limited staff, often it's volunteers doing this. So I just wanted to I told them I would share that with the legislature. So thank you.
Thank you, Ann. Deb Dawson.
Yeah, if I may, that's exactly why we're doing county funds and not ARP funds.
Yes.
Because we don't want to make people have to fill out 30
Right, that's what I told them. Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions or comments from legislators? Okay, I see none. Next, we will move on to a quick chair's report. I would like to welcome our new production media assistant, Rob Henry. He is training, there he is. He's training with Jim Blizzard and learning the ropes this evening. Doing a wonderful job. Welcome aboard, Rob. We're happy to have you. Okay.
We're testing the audio with the clapping.
Okay, just a few announcements. Our Department of Emergency Response has recently launched an updated emergency notification system that is replacing the previous SWIFT 911 system that most of us are used to. The new Tompkins County Siren system uses updated state-of-the-art technology and will better manage list of users, be more user-friendly during the sign-up and notification process, and allow for us to keep an archive of past alerts on our website. Notifications have already started to be sent through Siren, and it is proving to be a great example of intermunicipal collaboration. As several of our local municipalities use the system to send alerts to our residents, as well as the county, and used by our dispatchers. Many thanks are due to Doer staff for implementing this new and improved system. I actually signed up for it a few days ago, and I think I've already received 3 or 4 updates and notifications whenever there's an incident. I think the ones have actually been in the city of Ithaca, and there was one the other day on Route 13 where Warren Road is that I received an update for. So if anyone has questions, let us know. It is pretty easy to sign up, and you can get a notification either via email or text message or a phone call. In late March, Senators Schumer and Gillibrand announced over $4 million for local infrastructure projects, including a bridge replacement, resources to make the energy grid greener, and toward the conference center and affordable housing projects being constructed on Green Street. I thanked our federal partners for these resources and thanked everyone at the county and city who have advocated for these funding requests. And a little behind the scenes information, Deborah and I continue to meet with representatives from Schumer and Gillibrand's office on right now it's been on a biweekly basis, and have conversations. We had a conversation with the representative from Tom Reed's office last week, and they have released information on their earmark process. The deadline is very short. And so right now we're working with Lisa and Amy and asking department heads for projects that might fit into this really tight timeframe. And we will be prioritizing those and sending those to our representatives in hopes that we get some of the federal funds that they can earmark for our county. Whenever we have a list of those, I'll make sure to send those to all of the legislators so that you have an idea of what we're advocating for. We also are going to be sending those to our state representatives as well, because they're fighting for money as well with the state budget. The New York State budget continues to be in negotiations, and our staff is watching that process closely leading up to this year's county budget conversations. As we all know, the state's budget was due on the 1st, but the negotiations are ongoing. Other than that, I have no other announcements. We do have Jay Franklin, Director of Assessment, who is here to give us a presentation on the reevaluation process. Hello, Jay.
Hello, everyone. How y'all doing on this beautiful evening? So great to be here in my office. But I'm going to hopefully share my screen, and I got a quick little PowerPoint presentation here. So hopefully we can see that. And come on. There we go. Are we good to go?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. First off, I need to give some thanks to Dominic Recchio. As you know, Dom's trying to give us a brand here at the county that's well needed. And I think I'm the first guinea pig here for Dom's presentation here. So it really is going to make me step up my PowerPoint game. So bear with me as we kind of go through this. But I kind of wanted to take this opportunity to also kind of show who we are, kind of why we do what we do, how we did it, and where our results. I'm not exactly sure the last time I was before the full legislature for a presentation, so I'm going to take advantage of it. Kind of who we are. So we're unique here in New York State. We're the only true countywide assessing unit in New York State. And we were formed as a result of the 1968 county charter vote. What that did was take 20 part-time assessors and created 5 full-time staff. When they did the study back then, it wasn't about saving money. It was about providing a better service than what the part-time assessors could have done. So there was only the savings at that time, they estimated over a 3-year period would be about $5,500 a year over that 3-year period. A couple years ago, I took a look at what would it cost us to send the assessment function back to the towns like it is in every other county in New York State. And that would cost us around $620,000 if we were to decentralize our assessment function. thought that was pretty significant. There is benefits of having that consolidated office. I have a great staff of people. We're able to cross-train. I'm able to have people serve in multiple municipalities. So if someone's out for a week, someone else can step in because they've probably already been in that house or at least in that neighborhood and can answer one of our constituents' questions, hopefully intelligently. I am the assessor for the county, but I also serve as the real property tax director. Typically, every county has a real property tax director, but I just get to do those duties as opposed to just my assessor duties. And as we were going through with our 50th anniversary a little while ago, I saw this quote that I thought was pretty impressive in the Ithaca Journal. That the Charter Commission members chose to put the whole question on together in the belief that countywide assessing is perhaps the biggest asset in the whole charter. Not me, Ithaca Journal. But from what I've seen in my 25 and a half years here and the other 26 years at another Franklin held my job, we are very fortunate to have the structure we have and the support from the legislature and all of the town supervisors. I wouldn't do this job any other place. So Lisa, if you get rid of me, I'm moving on to a new career. But I also thought I'd put kind of our parcel breakdown here so you can kind of see we're vastly residential, meaning, 1, 2, 3 family houses. We have about 35,000 parcels in the county. So between residential, vacant, farm, forest land, that's the vast majority of our parcels. All of our apartments would be in the commercial class, and there's about 1,000 apartment parcels within the county. So we don't have a lot of industrial properties. Most of our industrial properties would be the poles, wires, and cables that run along streets. So we are very much a residential community here in Tompkins County. So the main reason why I'm here is why I think is because of our 2022 annual equity maintenance program. So this program is designed to make sure that everyone is assessed equitably each and every year. And the reason why we do that is because it's the law. The New York State Real Property Tax Law, Section 305 says, all real property in each assessing unit shall be assessed at a uniform percentage of value, fractional assessment, except if you're in New York City or something like that. We don't need to read all that italicized words. But all this says is as long as everyone is assessed at a uniform percent of value, whether that's 1%, 100%, 50%, regardless, as long as they are assessed at that each and every year, then we have an equitable assessment roll. The real property tax is an ad valorem tax. That's Latin for according to value. So we are strictly valuing that property. Who owns that piece of property or what the income is, can they pay that tax bill? That's not anything that affects value. There are exemptions that would help offset that tax burden. But for us, what we're trying to do is just what is the most probable sale price of that piece of property if you were to list it with a willing seller, a willing buyer, and the property sold in dollars. We're not trying to find the highest, most likely price, just that most probable price. So kind of why else do we do this? For the equity. If you're not changing assessments each and every year, I don't know how properties can be assessed equitably. There are some municipalities in New York State that haven't done a revaluation since the Civil War. I don't comprehend that. That just isn't anything in my knowledge base on how that could still be equitable. We've seen many studies that the higher appreciating neighborhoods are those more valued. And there are active court cases right now going on in New York City and Long Island, because if you don't adjust values, the lower income neighborhoods are the ones where the tax burden is more burdensome. They're paying more than what they should if those assessors kept up with their values. We do it for transparency's sake. At 100% level of assessment, it's easy to look. Look at your tax bill, look at your assessment change notice. Could you sell the property for that? Nice and simple. I was a math major at SUNY Binghamton. I can't figure out 49% unless I figure out 100% first. And I'm not going to do any more work than what I absolutely need to do. So I don't know that. But I put an example on the right side of this screen. So Nassau County assesses class 1 properties, so your single family houses, at 0.1%. So this is a friend of mine's house. His assessment in 2019 was $675. That translated to a fair market value of $675,000. But they've said your house is really worth $711,000. But due to their arcane restrictions on not being able to increase values, they've said that they're under assessing that house. They are admitting that this house isn't paying as much taxes as what they should, based upon the proportionate share across the board. Next year, they were able to raise that fair market value up a little bit, but it was still under assessing. And then in 2021, they were actually able to catch up to what the fair market value is. Now, that would seem somewhat explainable, but this is Nassau County. They're not a true countywide assessing unit. If you happen to live in the city of Glen Cove, you have another assessment. So for 2021, there was an assessment of $732 for county and school purposes, and an assessment of $619,000, which was at a level of assessment of 95%, which is translate to a value of $651,000. So is the 732 right, 732,000, or is the 651 right? Which one's right? You have two assessors for two different purposes coming up with two different answers, and that's not transparent. It doesn't make any sense to me. Maybe it makes sense to someone out there, but to me, it doesn't. We also do it so that we can defend our assessments. If we're not changing values each year, we're not adjusting values as they need to be, and that opens up us to a court case on where our values are not reflective of the market value of that property. We get increased state lands assessments, not necessarily for the county, but the towns and the schools receive tax dollars from that taxable state-owned land. It's exempt for county purposes. Because we do our AEM program each year, we get increased utility and special franchise assessments. Those are types of properties that New York State values, the poles, wires, and cables for gas companies and electric companies. We also get an increased bond rating. I know Rick likes to see each year that we're at 100%, and the next year we also will be at 100%. So there's a lot of good reasons, but the most important one is equity. That's what we're trying to do here. Why is our market increasing here in Tompkins County? Well, simply put, it's happening everywhere. This is probably one of those things that everybody talks about. Now that we've kind of moved on a little bit from COVID, everyone's talking about, wow, did you see what that house sold for? It's kind of that next conversation. Zillow said we're up 19%, CNN Business 17, US News, 19, Realtor.com 12%. And everything that I'm reading is predicting that this is going forward. Another reason why we have such an increasing market is because we haven't kept up to date with for sale housing. And I have a chart on that side, which shows the average new houses per year by decade within Tompkins County. And we're pretty much at wartime levels. If you look at the 1940s, we're just not building anything. We're less, we're what, 60 or 30, 40% of what we were in our peak when we were building houses. We're just not building them. And it's a basic economic law of supply and demand. with high demand and low supply, that's just going to drive up prices. Interest rates are low. When someone goes to buy a house, you're looking strictly at what you can afford on a monthly basis. Not really, is those bricks and mortars really worth that? So as interest rates are starting to climb, I think you'll see that pressure coming downward on those sale prices. And then, we always have cyclical market preferences. And, I say everything comes in a cycle, just like fashion. That's why I never change my clothes. You'll see me in sweater vests for the next 30 years. But with this, what I mean by that is after 9/11, kind of everyone wanted to move out of the urban areas and kind of have their own little patch of land, be able to, have some chickens, grow some of your own food, be able to kind of be independent. Then we kind of forgot about 9/11 and we wanted to move back to the walkable communities and have all your services around. With COVID, no one wanted to be near anyone. So we kind of moved back to that rural kind of mode. So everything is cyclical. We'll come back to urban living again very shortly, I would assume. Here's just a couple graphs showing our average and median sale price. The chart on the left will show you all of the residential sales in Tompkins County. So you can see our average sale price is now, almost $330,000. Our median sale price is $300,000. If you think about a $300,000 assessment would get you about a $9,000 tax bill, give or take, depending on if you're in a village or if you're in the city of Ithaca, which will be a little bit higher. The chart on the right shows the Ithaca Board of Realtor statistics for 2019, 2020, 2021. You can see a pretty significant increase over that time. And one telling stat here is the average selling price to list price. We are now over 100%. So what that means is simply for what the property is going to list for, there's probably going to be a bidding war that's going to drive the price above that list price. And I was just looking at a property today. It was on the market for $197,000. And I'm like, wow, that's really low for the Lansing School District. And then I looked and I saw 2 years ago, it was listed for $240,000. So I think what they're doing is trying to list that property low in anticipation of a bidding war driving that price up above. When I talk with realtors, they're confused as to what to do, whether to list the price or list the house where they think it's going to sell, or to try to get that bidding war going by listing the price under what they think it's going to sell for. It's definitely an interesting time. So you kind of saw the why we did. So now we get into the how we did it. So each July, I take a look at how does our assessment compare to the sale price for those sales that have occurred within that each year. And I take a look at that by county, by town, by neighborhood, by property type, by grade of house, how well it's built, by condition. So I try to stratify that as much as possible in order to find out which properties are moving so that those are the areas that we can readjust. So if that ratio is 1, great, our assessment is at our sale price and we don't need to do anything. If that ratio is under 1, our assessment is under the full value of the property, so we have to go in and revalue those. And if it's over 1, we would have to go in and decrease those values. And I think what people forget is from 1990 to 1997, that was really what we were doing each year. For those that have been around for a while, a little bit before my time, but the bubble popped in our real estate market back in '89, right after we did our revaluation in 1990. So even when I started here in '97, I was still reducing values up in the cigarette streets as my first project back in 1997. So we were still decreasing values then. Ever since then, we've kind of been on an upward tick. But besides that assessment sales ratio, we also look at other measures of uniformity and vertical equity. We look at the coefficient of dispersion, the price-related differential. That just tells you if you're under assessing high-price properties and over assessing low-price properties, because there is a tendency in appraisals to get everything into that middle. It's hard to reach out to that $2 million sale price or that $20,000 sale price. But all of our ratio, all of those statistics are within industry standards. I just started to use the price-related bias. I know what it does. I don't know the math behind it, so I'm not too into that, but that's just a new measure of vertical equity that's kind of come on stage in a while, but we'll be looking at that more. So there's a couple different ways that we can go out and revalue properties. We can do a parcel by parcel review. So we either sit in the car or sit at our desk and we go one property by one property. And then after we revalue those properties, then we make sure that we are equitable within those new values. So we'll take those new values, we'll say, all right, let's look at all of the good grade ranch houses in this neighborhood and make sure that they're within line. What I mean by that is if everything should be valued at about $150 a square foot, and we see something valued at $220, we go and look at that. And we say, oh, there's 10 more acres and a couple outbuildings. So there's a reason for that. If we see something valued at $80 a square foot and when everything should be $150, we'll look at it and we'll say, I don't see anything that's wrong with that house. So then we would bring that in line with the other properties that are similar to that. Another way to look at this is trending. So when those measures of uniformity are tight, your COD is tight, your PRD is tight, what you could simply do is just say all properties within this class will receive a X percentage increase. After we do that, then we do the same thing that I discussed. We stratify that. We're trying to make sure that all properties are uniform. Quick story, I have two new appraisers who were handling our informals. One was a parcel that went parcel by parcel review. The other one was a trended parcel. Both of those appraisers were criticized by the property owner because we weren't treating the properties the same. So I don't know which way we can do it, but one thing that I can say is either if we do a parcel by parcel review or we do a trending, we do make sure that all properties are assessed equitably after that. So this may be a little bit new, but this year I decided to send out assessment disclosure notices. We sent it back out in 2008, I think in 2000 as well. So what the assessment disclosure notice does is says, so here for Mr. Webb, we see his old assessment was $217,000. It was increased to $228,000. So with that new $228,000 assessment, and everybody else's new assessment, we can estimate what those taxes would have been for this property. And the chart on the left kind of shows how I did that. So the county's tax levy that was actually levied, you would probably know a $52,399,000 figure. But when we would take away the sales tax, we actually levy about $44.6 million. The overall county rate would be about 5.19. With our new tax base of a little over $9 billion, we can reduce the rate to 4.91 in order to generate that same 44.6 million. Now, the county is a little more complicated than that because there's a reapportionment between towns, but for the Lansing and the town of Lansing and Lansing School, it's a very simple calculation. Lansing needed $2.4 million last year. Their tax rate was about $1.59. With a new tax base of about $1.6 billion, they're able to reduce their rate to $1.51. So that's kind of how we did that, just to show this is the effect. And another point on this is this shows that reassessments do not add any tax dollars. So because we raised the value of the county 7 or 8%, you're not going to get 7 or 8% more money on your $44 million tax levy. Now, you can choose to do that through the budget process, but it doesn't happen automatically from this reassessment process. All the reassessment does is to reapportion what you're levying based upon the new values of that property. This is a good chart to show the number of changes that we've made over the years. That's the orange line. The blue line shows how many people came in to contest our assessment. So we typically average around 11% of the changes that we make that would come in and have their assessment reviewed. So as of this morning, we mailed 23,503 assessment change notices. We only have 1,047 appointments scheduled, or only 4.5%. So either we did a really good job, or I think people really understand that the market is still increasing today. And I'm looking at what we're going to need to do next year in order to maintain 100%. And we're probably going to have the similar number of changes, probably not the same dollar amount, but you're going to see a significant change in numbers just because the real estate market is still increasing. But we had about 3,500 appointments that we had ready to go. And I think tomorrow we have 12 parcels that are coming in for an appointment. It's just not the activity that we were anticipating. So as of right now, February 11th, we started mailing out these assessment change notices. We staggered that mailing so that we didn't have 23,503 people trying to call our office on the same day. We only have 2 office staff and a part-time person who still have their normal jobs to do. But by staggering these mailings, that gave everyone the same opportunity to have an appointment, schedule that phone appointment to talk to one of our appraisers and have their assessment reviewed again. With the uncertainty of COVID and wanting to treat everyone equitably, when we started these appointments, we were still kind of under some restrictions. So we just wanted to make sure that our office wasn't overwhelmed with people and we went to phone appointments. Luckily in 2020 and 2021, we did that as well. And we didn't notice any detriment to the property owner. They were still able to present their case and they were able to do it well. We also allow online submittals. We've been doing that for 20 years now. I think we had to be the first assessing unit that allowed online reviews to be submitted. So once those reviews come in, our appraisers review all of that information, and then they make a change if necessary. But the next step that we also do is we also plot everybody who came in, just to make sure that if there's 8 houses on a street and 6 came in and we reduce those 6, that we also look at those other 2 properties just to make sure that not just the squeaky wheel gets that reduction. So our last day to schedule a review is April 15th. That's also the last day to submit something in paper or online. So if you know of anyone, please drum up some business for us because we could use it. But that's all I got. And I'm gonna stop. And sorry for taking more time, but I was gonna use this opportunity to demo Dom's presentation.
It looked great, Jay.
Thank you so much, Jay, for coming in and giving a presentation. I know that many of us were emailed or given a call by our constituents because they were concerned about the increase of their assessment. So I'm glad that you could explain it a little bit to us as well as our constituents. Mike Sigler has a question.
Jay, I was just wondering, I understand the assessing to 100% and preserving the equity. Does any county do that and then back off from the 100% and say bill at 90% or bill at 95%? You know what I'm saying?
I think they have to, because the only way you can get to 95% is to get to 100% first.
Right.
But it doesn't really make a difference. You know, I could cut everyone's assessment in half. They'll hold
Right.
ticker tape parades for me. Yay,
would.
yay, assessor. But you would just double the tax rate and everyone's taxes would stay the same. So as long as everyone is assessed equitably, you could do 1%, you could do 1/4, 1%, or 100%. That's not the issue. The issue is to make sure that everyone is at that uniform percentage of value.
But would that be under your purview to knock it down to say 90%, or would that be the legislature's purview? Which
Yep. Oddly, the legislature chooses how frequently that I reassess properties, but I have the authority to choose that level of assessment.
Okay, Mike Lane, Randy Brown, and then Deborah Dawson.
It was really a great presentation, Jay. Thank you. I've seen you do these, but not for a long time. And I'm glad to have a lot of this information brought up to date again. The one thing that was jaw-dropping to me was your chart that showed the reduction in the new single-family houses, basically back to World War II levels. And we know people are crying for single-family houses. We've got to take a look at our comprehensive plans and the way we are doing things here. Because builders are gun shy of Tompkins County because we want the Cadillac of development. And if, you know, we want it all developed around nodes, for example. We don't want certain energy usage. We don't want certain kinds of development. All of that ought to be reviewed again, because we need to have Tompkins County open for development. And I realize we don't do the zoning. I know that. But what we need to do is figure out ways to get water and sewer to properties, for example, so that these properties can be developed into houses. And if we don't, we're going to continue to have this trend that you're showing us here. I'm sorry to make a speech on your presentation, but I think it's very important.
Thank you, Mike. Randy Brown.
Thank you. And thank you, Jay. I did learn quite a bit about that. I have a few questions. I did receive my assessment notices and they all went up, so thank you. But I also noticed that at the bottom, it showed if your tax was going to go up or down, and half of them went down and half of them went up. Is that based on the 2022 budget? How do you get to that?
Yep.
How does that go down?
Yep. So what that disclosure notice shows is here's what your taxes would have been if your assessment was in place and everyone else's new assessment was in place for the 2021, 2022 school taxes and your 2022 town and county tax. So it holds that tax levy constant, but brings in the new assessments for all of those properties. So this is a what if your assessment was in place last year.
Okay. Did a lot of people see their actual tax prediction go down? Was it 50-50 like I saw? Or?
Yeah, no, typically what happens when you do that in a typical reassessment is about a third of the properties would show a decrease, a third show an increase, and a third are about the same. So there are properties that did appreciate more than the average or the median change. I have those figures and how they broke them down. I could get that out to the legislature. But you know, the vast majority of the parcels we're somewhere within a, a negative $100 to a plus $100 change in your taxes.
My other question is on STAR and STAR exemption. I'm embarrassed to find out as I was looking closer at my assessment that we weren't getting the STAR exemption for the last 9 years. And I'm not blaming you, I'm blaming us, my wife and I. How we missed that, I have no idea. We built a new house and for some reason, I don't know, we just, I don't know if you have to apply for it or whatever. But are there other people that, can you tell us if there are other people that are supposed to get the STAR exemption aren't getting it so that we can share with them, hey, you can get this exemption? Is that data you have?
Yeah, STAR is probably the most confusing thing that we have because New York State now has their fingers all over it. So when I say that, in 2015, New York State put in the STAR check credit program. So any new homeowner from 2015 can or has to get these STAR savings in the form of a check as opposed to savings on their tax bill. We don't always get notified of who is going to get that check. So we miss some there. New York State reduced the income. So if you make under $500,000, you lost your STAR exemption. And you could have just missed it in that 1 year. You got an inheritance, sold a property, something like that. So you would have lost that STAR exemption in the 1 year, and then you have to sign up for the STAR tax credit. The state also has taken it away if there was a income tax liability that you owned. Now they're trying to look at if you're delinquent in your property taxes, they're going to increase your taxes by doing away with your STAR exemption. So all of what I just said is, I can get a list of who has a STAR exemption and whose mailing address is their property, but there are so many extenuating circumstances that I can't say this person probably should get it like they did. For people who are over 65 years of age, the state this year sent out a reminder saying, hey, you may be eligible for this exemption. So we're better on that. The one good thing, though, is with the change to the STAR check credit that's on your income tax, you can refile your income tax return up to 3 years in order to get that accelerated personal income tax credit from years past.
That's good to know. Thank you very much for that. The other thing I noticed is around my property, a few people houses came in the market and they went quick. In both times it was investors from just buying it sight unseen. They're buying these houses and from wherever they are, I don't know where they come from. And then they pay a bidding. It goes into a bid and all of a sudden it goes way up. I mean, I'm not, I know you don't have an answer for that, but I just wanted to let you know that I was reading articles about that and it's happening quite a bit. And so even single family homes are being bought up by investment companies, big companies. And it's may not really be the true market value. I realize you can't differentiate between that, but that was my observation. So thank you.
Yeah, one step that we've taken over this past year is, when we did our sales review, we would typically say, well, how many beds, how many bathrooms do you have? What do you heat with? Those are kind of basic questions that we already know the answer, but we've dived deeper into why did you buy here? Where are you coming from? Did you look somewhere else? Was there a bidding war? We're trying to get more into the minds of buyers. And, most of the people that we see coming back here have some sort of connection to our community. They're coming back for family. They went to Cornell or IC. They're not just kind of spinning the globe and saying Ithaca looks like a good place to go to. For our apartment class of properties, we are definitely seeing what you described. People just paying ungodly amounts of money that are not supported by their income just so that they could pad their portfolio and look like a bigger company than maybe what they are.
Thank you.
Next is Deborah Dawson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Initially, I just wanted to compliment Jay on being able to make what's ordinarily a really dry and boring subject, highly entertaining. So thanks for that, Jay. But I did want to address a point that Mike Lane raised. There's more going on here, I think, than just our selectivity in zoning standards. If that was all that was retarding the development of single-family homes here, I would imagine that Caroline, which is currently in the midst of a huge kerfuffle over whether they want to have zoning or not, would be seeing massive increases in the number of single-family homes that were being built there. You know, I raise this because I know what it costs to build something. I hear it secondhand from my husband, who's the mayor in Lansing, and we've got a sewer project that's been on the books for a couple of years that initially was supposed to cost X dollars and now costs X times 1.25. I think a big piece of the problem, especially currently, is the cost of construction. Cost of construction here has always been exceptionally high for the same reason that the cost of anything here is exceptionally high. And you know this, Mike, because you've preached this gospel for a long time about how, you know, Route 13 is our major artery to the rest of the world. It's hard to get stuff here. It costs a lot of money to get stuff here. We don't have a lot of local construction companies. I don't think that changing the demands of our, local zoning is going to improve the situation all by itself. That's just my opinion based on my limited experience here, but it just costs a lot of money to build things here. And it's not only because our local land use regulatory authorities want quality. My 2 cents.
One thing on there, I do talk to a lot of developers, and a lot of them just say, just tell us what we want, what you want us to build. Don't make us come through 12 meetings with, they have to bring their architect, their engineer, their attorneys, their realtor, in order to try to get a project through. They just want to know what's happened. We're able to do an amazing job on apartments. There's cranes all out my window that I can see. We just haven't put that effort on the for sale housing. And in my opinion, if we had more for sale housing, we would need less apartments as well.
If I may, I have to say I was on a planning board for several years and I still watch their meetings. And what I see from a lot of the residential developers, I wish they would just say, what do you want? We'll build it. But no, they want to argue. They come in, they've got a plan, and they don't want to change it. So.
Okay, I just want to do a little bit of a time check. It is 7:22 p.m. and we have 3 more speakers left for this topic. So let's go with Greg Mezzi.
Yeah, first, I really strongly agree with Mike Lane. Deborah, I do also not feel that it is just a zoning issue, but I do think that we have an opportunity as legislators to encourage our local municipal partners to really think critically about how they present their zoning, where there's opportunity within those communities to attract development. And then I also think there's a responsibility on our part and the municipal part to help reduce the burden of infrastructure cost so that, you don't have to have such large lot sizes and you can create more density and you can build more single family homes, on a lot that's not just 2 acres big because of, septic requirements and well requirements and things like that. So I do think that there's a role that we can play. I'd love to figure that out. Dan, I know that housing is in your committee and I hope you take this up with vigor and try to solve the issue because it's a big one. As you can see, we need more bricks and sticks built across the county. Jay, I appreciate the time. I could probably talk assessment and this topic for a long time. So really appreciate all of that information that you brought. Just to sort of ask a question on the sort of the calculation and how you get to, especially as we start to see, a $200,000 home that's now selling for $400,000. If hypothetical, if we have a street of 10 houses that are all similar homes, right? Let's say they're all assessed in and around the 200,000. One sells for now 450,000 because of the lack of supply, crazy COVID times, all of the above. Does that mean the other 9 now come up close to somewhere around the sale price to be equitable and fair? Or is it just the one that sells that gets reassessed? And how much are we taking assessments up in a scenario like that for those other 9 that are, that didn't transact, but have, probably for the last several years been in and around that 180 to 220 assessment range probably?
Yeah, I could probably talk for 20 minutes on this kind of topic because it kind of all depends, but I'll try to do it in 30 seconds or a minute. So the first thing we would do is we're not always right, but we're not always that bad. So if something was assessed at 200,000 and sold for 450, did we miss something? Was something renovated? Was there an unfinished basement that's now finished? So we want to quantify that. One sale doesn't make the market. So we would look at that one sale and be like, all right, these people may have overpaid because I have 6 other sales that support that $200,000 assessment. Now, once you start getting enough sales that would then support that $450,000 sale price, then that first sale becomes a good sale. It's not an outlier anymore. We see this so frequently in Fall Creek. If you can have a 1,400 one bath, 3 bed house that sells for $520,000, that kind of affects the value of everything else. But we could look at that one sale and kind of say, all right, this one's a little bit of an outlier. I have these other sales that would then put that house at 400,000. So I'm not going to believe that $520,000 sale today. In 6 months, that $520,000 sale may be then supported. So it's not just a simple answer, but if that is an indication of the market at 450, then all 9 of those houses will be adjusted, not just the one that sold. We don't want to play welcome stranger or hello neighbor. We're going to treat everybody equitably.
So in that situation, if nothing had really changed, somebody just overpaid because they needed to buy a house and the supply is low, does their assessment change to the sale price? Or because it is an outlier, do you assess it at really what the value should have been?
We would value it at what its value should have been. Because we have one sale that supports that higher price, but all of our other sales support the lower price. Once we start getting enough sales to support the higher price, then it doesn't become an outlier anymore. And then we would go in and revalue that street.
Thank you.
Ann Corman and then Leigh Sherlock.
Thank you for the presentation. I'll try and keep my comments, my question brief. But just to say, as growing up in a family with real estate and being a home inspector, I found every aspect of your presentation very fascinating. Did we, so my question is, and perhaps I missed it in an email, did legislators receive, excuse me, dates and times of the municipal assessment board reviews that we're supposed to attend?
Yeah.
And does that come from you or the municipalities?
It'll come from us. The last I checked with Irene, we were still missing, I think, 3 municipalities. I've been out of the office the last week, but I'll check with her tomorrow and we can at least give tentative dates out for those hearings that were set.
Because some are in April, correct?
No, they would be the first week of May 5th through the 19th, I believe, something like that.
Yeah, or at least if we could have the ones that you do have. Thank you, thank you.
Yeah, May 9th through the 20th.
Yeah, just to be able to put them on our calendars. Thank you.
Next is Leigh Sherlock.
Jay, I wish I'd have seen your crystal ball before I let my real estate broker's license go. Anyways, one question, or what I hope is a short question for you, and then maybe a follow-up, not to put Lisa or our budget committee chair on the spot. And I just think of this in terms of the public out there listening to it and what the overall impact becomes when they see the assessments and the changes. I think I caught where the overall taxable assessment is out of your presentation in the $9 billion range, I think I heard, or what the overall assessment is. What are you projecting to be in rough numbers, the increase in the total assessed value or taxable value from one year or one review to the next? Are we seeing a 10% raise or 5% or what have you?
Yeah, it's still a little complicated at this point in time because we still have exemptions that we're administrating. We still have our reviews that are going in. So when I did that assessment disclosure notice, I said, we're going to lose, somewhere between 1% to 2% of those increases that we had. So I would probably guess, as of right now, the county's tax base is up a little over 8%, 8.03%. So that would probably come down a little bit as we go through these reviews. We add some exemptions. I add some of the IDA exemptions. But 7.5% is probably a good figure of what I'd see.
I appreciate that. And here's the follow-up. And it relates to as we head toward the budget retreat and setting the parameters for next year. And I think, the rule of thumb, and this is where you need to educate me as a new member and maybe some others. And we go into this and set a target, and we base it on an increase in the potential increase in the tax levy of 2%, or trying to stay within that. When you set the assumptions for the budget moving ahead, do you start right with that tax levy from last year and move it forward, whatever number we agree to as a group, say it is the 2%, or do we take it back to something that would reflect the new assessments and a reduction possibly happening there before you look at that tax levy?
Yes. The change in assessment will be included in the calculation, but we're also looking at what it would take to maintain current level of effort. So there are many other assumptions that have to be baked in, including including the increased cost of labor, any known increases or changes in mandate costs, et cetera. So we're not necessarily starting from with last year's increase in the tax levy as a starting point necessarily. We're including a number of factors to get to what it would take to maintain level of effort and then either going up or down from there.
I'm just trying to get the point across to my constituents that we're not necessarily taking advantage of that inflated assessment role and taking that and moving it on to the next arbitrary number or not necessarily arbitrary or studied number that we come up with, but the tax levy may reflect the benefits of that.
So the change in assessed value will have an impact on the tax rate, but not the tax levy necessarily. That makes sense.
Yeah, I would just say that we end up having to figure out how much money we think we're going to need. And then we kind of back into how much of that we can expect to come from the levy and how much of it might come from sales tax.
Any other questions, Leigh? Okay. Henry Granison.
Yes, thank you for your presentation. And I'm not sure as it's asked before, but in Greg's example of a house being sold for $450,000, we know that many corporations are buying up properties. If it's if it's turned to Airbnb or something else. If that happens, what?
Henry, you're muffled a little bit. We can't hear you very well.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, if a corporation buys up a property and turns it to an Airbnb for the $450,000, is that still just considered an outlier?
Yeah, the short-term rentals is a much bigger appraisal question. Because if someone didn't buy it as an Airbnb, would that value be overly affected by that? We're not really seeing a lot of Airbnbs where the rentals can support a sale price of what people are paying for that single family home. But it's something that we're constantly monitoring. And just because I choose not to rent my property as an Airbnb and I'm using it as a single family house, that change in use is something that the appraisal community is looking at. It's such a new phenomenon that we haven't caught up. I was on a state meeting today and we were looking at creating a new property class code for an Airbnb. But how do you define that? If you rent it out just for Cornell graduation, are you an Airbnb? If you rent it out every weekend, are you an Airbnb? Or where is that middle? Where is that short-term rental? Hopefully with the data that we're gathering from our planning departments, we can kind of see a little bit more. But I guess that's just a lot of words to say we're looking at it. And that's why we also dive down deep into why did you buy this property? Did you buy it as a speculative Airbnb or did you buy it as a single family home? So kind of stay tuned for that. And as we get more data, we'll see if the market tells us that there's a difference for an Airbnb as opposed to a normal rental or a normal single family home.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Jay? I see no hands. Why don't we take a 10-minute break? It's 7:37 and we can return at 7:47 and resume our meeting.
We're different. We're different.
Okay. It is 7:50 and we went a few minutes over for our break. Okay, let's go ahead and start off with the report. Thank you. Let's start off with our report by our brand new county administrator, Lisa Holmes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Happy to start off the second half of the meeting with a quick congratulations to the Kansas Jayhawks for last night's win.
Oh, good.
I wasn't.
Is that Deanna Crither's home team, right? All right.
Deanna, good job.
Rock Chalk Jayhawk. All right. So tonight, for the first time in a while, we don't have a full formal COVID update or presentation, but I wanted to draw everyone's attention to the press release that went out today regarding the second booster doses for people who qualify. The county has been reaching out to individuals who were previously registered for updates and would meet the eligibility criteria, namely adults age 50 and over, 4 months after their first booster, those age 18 to 49 who received Johnson & Johnson as their primary and booster doses, or those age 12 and up who are immunocompromised. Our health department is not hosting booster clinics, but encouraging anyone eligible to sign up for boosters through their primary providers or through pharmacies locally. Also, it was mentioned earlier, I and county admin staff are immersed in prep work for the 2023 budget retreat coming up on April 26th. And on that note, we have posted on the HR website an employment opportunity for budget director. If people, anyone who's interested and qualified to apply, those applications are due April 11th. We also have an internal posting for deputy county administrator. So we are seeing that as an internal opportunity for professional development for internal candidates, and though that is posted through April 17th. And then last but not least, I wanted to welcome Mona Lita Smiley, our Community Justice Center Project Director, who's going to give us a brief update on reimagining public safety.
Hi, Mona Lita.
Hi, thanks, Lisa, for the intro. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can take a look at what we've got going on. So, just a reminder of what our charge was. It stems from the New York State Executive Order 203 that centers community of color. Can everyone see my screen at this point?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right. So the local reimagining plan that was passed by the city and county in April of 2021, inclusive of plans to collaboratively, reimagine public safety and to create and implement the Community Justice Center. So we look at the Community Justice Center, where we're at right now is that we are recruiting for the data analysis. So the application window has closed. The applications are currently being reviewed and we will be scheduling interviews in the upcoming weeks. We're also building community connections even more and more. We're working with LEAD right now. I am a member of the community leadership team, which has been amazing so far. And right now we're looking at how our community engagement plans will coincide between the CJC and LEAD. And then the planning of the Mosaic in partnership with Southside is actually going, the planning is going pretty well. We are in the process of reviewing the timeline for the project, and hopefully we'll get started within the next month or so. Plans that we have in progress right now, I'm sure everyone is aware, and George talked about it briefly earlier, the city will meet tomorrow. So it's the City of Ithaca Department redesign. It was delivered to Common Council by the working group, and tomorrow they're going to begin discussion of the plan. There are 3 FAQs that have been published and 2 town halls that have been completed, and they're viewable on the city's YouTube page. We are working on possibly having another town hall. We've got some feedback from the senior citizen community that they would like to have a more in-person conversation about this. So we're looking at exploring that option. The community healing plan is in progress. The sessions have been held with the Black community, and we will have our 3rd session on April 23rd, and that's with Dr. Acosta and Dr. Latrice Harrison. And then we are in conversations with law enforcement healing discussion. Topics and items are under consideration based on a proposal by Dr. Lorenzo Boyd. The alternative response program, so our stakeholder group has met. There's been a timeline established and the plan, and we will present that to the Public Safety Committee once that's been finalized. Officer wellness, we met with Cortico, which is a company that offered us a demonstration on an officer wellness app for smartphones that would eliminate the in-person, an officer having to go and speak with someone in person. So that was a pretty cool app. I was pretty impressed by it. They would have 24-hour access to peers or therapists without, with a huge confidentiality barrier there. So that'll be interesting. And I'm looking forward to looking at that a little bit more. The Tompkins County Sheriff's Pilot Program. So for the clerk positions, the interviews were completed and they are making conditional offers to 2 candidates. There's the unarmed call delineation that's under review. Excuse me, and it's still to be completed. And that'll be what types of calls will be managed by the clerk rather than armed officers. So there will be a non-emergency response. There will be a sergeant working with the clerks to provide them backup as they have a soft launch. So there have been some call types that have been identified for that process to, to begin. And the CJC Advisory Board is in the final stages. So the report has been delivered to the legal teams at the city and county level. We're waiting for feedback from them about that, about the process and the development of the committee. And then the development subcommittee has concluded its work. It was a long, long process. Long before I started, they were working on it, but we are finally at a point where their work has been done. So we'll just wait to receive those reports from the legal teams. And then report for the elected officials will come pending legal review of what has been submitted to them. And that's where we're at with the Community Justice Center. Are there any questions?
Does anyone have questions for Mona Lisa? Veronica Piller?
Thank you. You probably said this at a previous meeting, but can you remind us who are the stakeholders of the alternative response team?
Oh, boy, there's a bunch. The stakeholders are, right off the top of my head, let me see here. We've got the Sheriff's Department, the Ithaca Police Department, the mental health, public health. I mean, there is quite an extensive list of them. Just thinking right off the top of my head, hold on, I'll pull it up. We've got the Department of Emergency Response, Health and Human Services, Mobile Crisis Unit, OAR. So, like I said, the Sheriff's Department. We will be looking at, we're still trying to identify alternative entities that may not have been mentioned before. So there was a meeting earlier today with Harmony and Frank for them to identify people that we think we should bring to the table, trying to keep the group not too large. Right now we're like 14 different identities, so we want to be able to we want to need to have everyone's voices heard at that time. So there's quite a few different ones. It hasn't been finalized yet, so when it is, we'll definitely make sure that it's public information on who's going to be on that team.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Ann Corman?
Thank you for this update, Mona. I hesitate to bring this up, but I often bring this up to different people at the county. So just to let you know, I'm not picking on you. But when people are doing presentations, we often, I just try and remember that we're doing them for the community as well. So if you could just think about that when you use acronyms or abbreviations.
Okay, yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? I do not see any. Thank you very much, Monalita, for joining us this evening.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate your presentation. Okay, Lisa, do you have anything else for us?
That's it for me tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next is County Attorney Bill Troy.
Yes, I have one matter I can discuss right now is our new deputy county attorney has been hired. Her name is Holly Mosier. I don't know if you folks know her, but we've kind of hit the ball out of the park, if you ask me, with her hire. She's great. So I'll pat myself on the back for that, even though it's undeserved. I do have several matters I want to discuss with you in executive session as indicated. They will not take long and they're not that juicy, but I just want to keep it in a confidential setting.
Any questions for Bill? Okay, good job on that hire, Bill.
Thank you.
Welcome, Holly. Okay, next, Director of Finance. Rick Snyder's not with us, but we do have Drew. Hello, Drew.
Hello there. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening to everybody. Very brief report from Finance, just a quick update. We have a couple vacancies that you're aware of that Rick updated you last meeting. The accounts payable is closed and we have a number of good resumes in. Rick and I have started reviewing them and we're going to make some calls next week. Director of Accounting Services, which is our accounting manager, is posted and advertised. It's open till April 29th. Please share that with anyone that you're interested in. Anyone watching, if you're interested, please go to the county website and take a look at the open positions in the HR site. It's a great job, great folks to work with, if I do say so myself. So lots of fun. And kind of along that line, as you recall, about a year ago, year and a half ago, the accounting services director and myself were filling in for purchasing. Over a year period or so, we did about 30, 35 bids and got those out. We've hired two people who are great. One's part-time, one's full-time. So far in just the first 3 months of 2022, they've done almost 40 bids and they've got about 7 or 8 in the works right now. So you've probably, if you're watching the local paper, you've seen our bid notices out more, and we're really trying to get the county name out there. A couple of them we got to work with Dominic on getting some more community involvement in those bids. So things have been going strong. We're trying to support departments very well and do the best we can with the taxpayer dollars. I'm open to any questions. That's all I have tonight.
Thank you, Drew. Any questions from legislators? Okay, I see no hands. Thank you very much for joining us for the report.
Thank you.
There are no other reports from county staff, and wanted to ask if there are any resolutions to be added or withdrawn from the agenda. I see none. Let's move on to our consent agenda. Resolutions and appointments to be voted on as a group unless any member of the legislature requests that a resolution or appointment be instead included separately and individually as part of the business of standing or special committees. Advisory board appointments, ID 10753. Substance Abuse Subcommittee, Tom Lipa, Community Member Representative, term expires December 31st, 2025. Jacob Parker Carver, Community Member Representative, term expires December 31st, 2025. Recreation Partnership Board, Travis Brooks, Legislature Representative, term expires December 31st, 2023. Health and Human Services Committee, Resolution A, authorization to disperse county funds to the Community Housing Development Fund for Round 22 awards, ID 10777. Resolution B, budget adjustment, purchase of department vehicles, Tompkins County Office for the Aging, ID 10765.
Facilities and Infrastructure Committee, Resolution C, approving Tompkins County's 2022 Title 11 program for the Federal Transit Administration. Oh, that's Title 6, sorry. Let's see, where was I? ID 10807, Planning Development and Environmental Quality Committee. Resolution D, Budget Adjustment Tourism Program, ID 10734. Resolution E, Spring 2022 Tourism Project Grant Awards, ID 10778. Resolution F, Spring 2022 Tourism Marketing Grant Awards, ID 10779. Resolution G, Spring 2022 Community Celebration Grant Awards, ID 10780. Resolution H, Acceptance of Snowmobile Trail Grant for the 2021-22 season, ID 10825. If I could have a mover, please. Move. Oh,
Can I remove F and G, please?
yeah, we could do that. Okay, so those will go to the Planning, Development and Environmental Quality Committee during their standing report. Can I have a mover, please? Moved by Deborah Dawson, seconded by Veronica Piller, and we're going to do a roll call.
Dan Klein,
Yes.
Ann Corman,
Yes.
Mike Lane,
Yes.
Greg Mezzi,
Yes.
Veronica Piller,
Yes.
Leigh Sherlock,
Yes.
Mike Sigler,
Yes.
Travis Brooks,
Yes.
Randy Brown,
Yes.
Deborah Dawson,
Yes.
Henry Grandison,
Yes.
Rich John,
Yes.
Shauna Black,
Yes,
13 ayes, 0 nos.
thank you. Next, we are going to the Standing and Special Committees, Budget, Capital and Personnel Committee, Deborah Dawson, Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have a meeting coming up next Monday, April 11th. Of interest among our agenda items are our resolution to update the county's fiscal policy to change the rollover portion of that policy, and also the adoption of Juneteenth as a paid employee holiday. And we might get a little bit of a preview from our county administrator as to the direction that our budget retreat may be taking. So stay tuned for more exciting news from Budget, Capital, and Personnel.
Thank you, Deborah. Any questions for Deborah Dawson? Okay, I see none. Thank you. Workforce Diversity and Inclusion Committee, Henry Grandison, Chair.
Yes, we met a couple of weeks ago. We passed the resolution to deal with Juneteenth as a paid holiday to go into Budget, Capital, and Personnel. We also finalized our work plans. We also had a discussion about the budget in connection with what we would do with it and how we would how it connected with our work plans. We also had an interesting discussion about some DEI seminars, which I want to talk to the chairs about basically doing things for legislators and heads of agencies, heads of departments. But, you know, that will happen in the future. Also, we had a discussion, well, maybe that's it. Those are the discussions that we had.
Thank you, Henry. Any questions for Henry Grandison? I see none. Thanks, Henry.
Thanks.
Public Safety Committee, Rich John, Chair.
Thank you, Shauna. The Public Safety Committee will be meeting April 21st. And I believe we will be getting a report on reimagining public safety at that point, some of the updates that are coming. And I do have a resolution, and I would move budget adjustment and appropriation of contingent funds to various accounts of the Tompkins County District Attorney, Doc ID 10687, and I would move it.
If I could have a seconder, please. Seconded by Veronica Piller. Would you like to explain this resolution, Rich?
This is an adjustment in one of the salaried positions at the district attorney's office. And it just changes the salary and the fringes.
Okay. Any questions for Rich? I see no hands. Let's do a roll call vote.
Dan Klein,
Yes.
Ann Corman,
Yes.
Mike Lane,
Yes.
Greg Mezzi,
Yes.
Veronica Piller,
Yes.
Leigh Sherlock,
Yes.
Mike Sigler,
Yes.
Travis Brooks,
Yes.
Randy Brown,
Yes.
Deborah Dawson,
Yes.
Henry Grandison,
Yes.
Rich John,
Yes.
Shauna Black,
Yes.
13 ayes, 0 nos.
Any other questions for Rich John, Chair of Public Safety?
I did have one other item I just wanted to update the legislature on, which is our jail numbers have moved up a bit. And I'm not quite sure why, but we're at 55 as our current census and one board out. This is a higher number. If you look at the numbers across the month, they were in the 40s and it's just steadily moved up. I don't know why, but I imagine we'll be looking at that at our next public safety meeting.
Thank you, Rich. Any questions for Rich? Okay, thank you. Next is Health and Human Services Committee, Dan Klein, Chair.
Thank you. I have a somewhat longer than usual report today. I think this information is important for the legislature and the public to hear about. So thank you for indulging me. The Health and Human Services Committee met on March 21st. We were introduced to Cindy Wilcox, who will be taking over as Executive Director of the Human Services Coalition on April 11th as Kathy Schlatter retires. We heard a presentation from Lisa Monroe from the County Office for the Aging on the subject of home health aides, a subject which I would personally label as a crisis. There has been a shortage of home health aides for a long time, and the pandemic has only made the situation worse. Many people contract directly with private agencies to get home health aides. Many don't, and some of those end up being served by the county in various ways. The county contracts with multiple agencies to provide home health aid services. We have about 100 clients with 15 to 20 on the waiting list. Some other counties hire home health aides directly. Tompkins County has not done that in the past, but is about to do that for the first time this year. These new positions are civil service positions. The pay will be $20.81 an hour. Normal pay in the private sector for these kinds of positions is in the $14 to $15 an hour range. Also, when the county contracts with a private agency, we pay the private agencies roughly $27.50 an hour, but the employee gets more like $15 an hour. So by hiring home health aides directly, we save money and the employee makes more money. Other benefits of hiring directly. The employees get all the county benefits, health insurance, vacation, etc., and they get access to a vehicle. Lack of transportation is a big limiting factor for many potential home health aides, especially for visiting clients in the rural areas. The County Office for the Aging was able to put together the funding for these new home health aides from non-county sources, so it's not coming out of our tax money. They decided to create two part-time positions at 20 hours a week each. And the initial hiring process for the first one is going on right now. The Human Services Coalition has 2 working groups to try to address the home health aides issue. And the County Office for the Aging belongs to a statewide advocacy organization that works on the home health aides issue. Here is a non-surprising statistic. 90% of people in need of care want to stay in their homes. Here is a statistic that may be slightly more surprising. The cost for a nursing home is in excess of $150,000 a year. The average cost to the county's program to provide these services is under $8,000 a year. So there's just so many reasons why, home health aides are a good investment. Lisa Monroe will be checking back in with the committee later in the year to report on the status of the new county-based home health aid program. Okay, we were introduced to Alicia Canali, who just started recently as the Executive Director of the Family and Children's Services last month. We heard about a new upcoming program that is really interesting and exciting, and I want to describe it. And the words are not my own, so I may not be able to answer questions if you have them about this program, but at least you'll have heard about it, and you'll be hearing more about it as time goes on. So Tompkins County Mental Health and the Family and Children's Service of Ithaca have sought a one-year collaborative grant of $300,000 to pilot the Rural Outreach Worker Program. The Rural Outreach Worker Program will provide home and community-based support to divert individuals who live outside the city of Ithaca who are living with serious mental illness and are experiencing a non-imminent mental health crisis from the legal system. Sorry, they are being diverted from the legal system. There's a comma there. Individuals will also receive housing support, basic needs, and rigorous case management assistance to engage in services critical to their well-being. This Rural Outreach Worker Program will be modeled after the highly successful Community Outreach Worker Program, also run by Family and Children's Services, which has been a successful diversion strategy for individuals with serious mental illness living or congregating in the downtown Ithaca area. Funding will support hiring 2 full-time outreach workers and an outreach coordinator and purchasing a mobile van and computer tablets. The van will allow outreach workers to make home visits, provide transportation, and deliver health and safety materials and basic needs items to isolated individuals in the rural areas. Tablets will enable outreach workers to assist individuals with efficiently completing paperwork and convenient access to the internet. While Family and Children's Services is still working through the administrative and contracting process with New York State, they have been told that no challenges are anticipated with the grant moving through. And then the last thing I wanted to report on, I think maybe had been reported at the last legislature meeting. It went out in an email. It has to do with the opioid settlement money that we, Tompkins County, will be receiving $192,000 this year from one of the opioid settlements, and $110,000 annually after that for 18 years. Half of that money needs to be used for direct service programs that it's not replacing what we're already doing, and the other half is unrestricted. And then on top of that, there are more opioid settlements that have not been settled yet that the county might receive money from. Lisa, was there anything in there that I misstated in that part?
No, that was accurately stated. Thanks, Stan. The one thing I'm still have some outstanding questions with NISAC and the Attorney General's office about the stipulation of the unrestricted funding versus the restricted funding. So I'll let you know when we get more details there.
Thank you. Next meeting of the HHS committee is Monday, April 18th, 3 o'clock. We will be having a presentation about tobacco sales enforcement in our county from the health department. That concludes my report. And if there are any questions about it, I can take those. Otherwise, I'll move on to the resolution.
Wow, what a report, Dan. Wonderful. Thank you.
I find that information, especially about the home health aides, really interesting and not widely known. I think it's important information.
That is true. And I'm actually relieved and happy to hear that we're paying the home health aides what they really deserve. I've worked in healthcare before, and I remember hiring aides at $9.50 an hour. And that is some of the hardest work in this world. So I am very glad to hear that we're paying upwards of $20. Randy Brown, question?
I'd just like to add something from the presentation from the Office of Aging. They showed a lot of data on how the need for home health aides is going to grow because of the ages of population. So I support that. I think that other data they showed us is who's really providing the healthcare today. And about a third of the time, it's a family member. So I would think that training family members or that type of services, that's not going to change. Maybe even certify them in some way when they're already doing the work might be a good idea. So,
Thank you, Randy. Any other questions or comments for Dan? Okay, Dan, would you like to move forth with your resolution?
Well, thank you. Yes, we do have one resolution, and Veronica Piller was one of the authors of the resolution along with some community members. So I'm wondering if Veronica wants to move it.
Sure, thank you. I would like to move resolution number J, reaffirming support for a single payer approach to controlling healthcare costs and ensuring everyone is covered, and urging the New York State Senate to enact the New York Health Act, A.6058 S.5474.
Okay, Veronica moves, Dan seconds. And Veronica, would you like to talk to the resolution?
Sure. So I think most people are probably familiar with the New York Health Act, but if not, it would establish a single payer health insurance system throughout all of New York State, meaning that everyone, any resident of New York State would automatically have health insurance coverage through the state, unlike the current situation where you can maybe get that through Medicaid if you qualify, or Medicare, or any number of private insurances. And as we know, there's lots of barriers to actually getting insurance coverage, leaving people to be uninsured or underinsured, meaning that they have insurance but still struggle to access care that they need. So the New York Health Act would address many of those problems. It's been in the Assembly in some form or another for 30 years, and has been getting like refined and edited over those years. And in its current form, it also covers all medically necessary care, long-term care as of this year, vision, dental. This really ties into some of the stuff Dan was just talking about. It would be paid for primarily through a system of payroll tax that would replace, for most people, it would replace the payments that we now make in various forms for health insurance, so that well over 90% of New Yorkers would end up paying less for healthcare, like all told, than we do now. And it would improve the efficiency of the system by cutting out all the work needed to, carefully do billing and make sure that all works. I saw a very striking graph. I wish I had a visual aid of the number of words in providers' notes and the distribution of like words per like medical event in the US versus in other countries. And it's like, they don't even overlap. We have to put in here just so much more time writing to make the health insurance companies happy. Three more quick things I want to tack on, include in addition to what's in the resolution. One, another striking graph I saw recently was ranking among different age groups from birth to quite old, comparing 17 countries, kind of like the US in terms of development, in terms of where they rank in life expectancy, based like starting from that age group. And the US is pretty low, it's mortality rates in that age group. The US is like at the bottom, meaning highest mortality rate, or very near there, until you get to age 65. And then we swoop up and we have the lowest mortality rates at the end. And yes, the most likely reason, that's when Medicare kicks in. That's when people get universal health insurance, which really shows the power of this in keeping us healthy, and also really focusing on preventive care. Two more quick notes. We just heard a lot of details about property taxes in New York State. About like a quarter of our property taxes, a fifth that we collect, go to paying for Medicaid, which is not the case in other states. That would instantly go away if we pass the New York Health Act and shift the burden away from this, like the inherently regressive property tax. Another thing, I just yesterday was in a meeting talking about the opiate crisis, which has come up here a few times, obviously a big deal. And somebody from a community that's like hit hard by this said that oftentimes people's struggles with opiates begin because they've got some kind of pain issue, and because of cost, because of access to doctors, they're not able to access appropriate pain relief, well managed, and so they seek it in other forms, and then it spirals out of control. So I bring those up just to show that this issue really touches a lot of other things that we are already concerned about. And thank you for listening to my spiel.
Thank you, Veronica. Any questions or comments on this resolution? Ann Corman and then Mike Sigler.
I'm really happy to support this and for all the reasons that Veronica said. Just one thing I wanted to add was that a couple of years ago, so this is a resolution reaffirming. So a couple of years ago, we did pass a resolution in support of this. And I really think this is the way to go. This has been worked on for a number of years, and having worked in healthcare myself and having been, guess I can say it now because I'm out of it, but having been pushed to discharge people because the funding ran out, being pushed to, as you said about like writing, the amount of writing that I had to do just increased year over year, and then being pushed, you know, that was what the last job that I had in healthcare. And it's just why I left. I said, because there's no place that those two things meet if you want to keep increasing the percentage of time that I was billing and then getting my paperwork done. I said it was just impossible. And so they said, then maybe this job isn't for you. And I said, maybe it's not. And I left because I just couldn't do it. The ethics that they push people to. And then I got in trouble for working late. They found out I was working late to do my paperwork. And that was a problem because I was staying in the office and I was just like, you got to be kidding me. So anyway, we have to do something different. I've gone without health care. My brother, who I mentioned earlier, who has cancer, is struggling to try and figure out how to pay for things. And so anyway, we need to do something different. This is the solution. So happy to support this.
Thank you, Ann. Mike Sigler.
So I agree. We have to maybe do something different because we've tried to do this for 30 years, or not we, but certain members of the state have tried to get this passed for, as you said, 30 years. And here it is again. And I'm going to vote against it this time, just like I did the last time. Medicare is not universal health care coverage. It is something you pay for. That is something that we tried to do with Obamacare. With varied success, I suppose, with that. A lot of people gained coverage, a lot of people lost coverage. I guess time will tell how successful that program is. When it comes to this, this is not a partisan issue. This is not, wow, Republicans don't want this. Democrats are in full control of the legislature. They are in full control of the state. If they thought that this was something that they could do fiscally, they have had years now to do this. And they don't. And that's why last time this came forward, I presented a competing resolution. It's individual member filed resolution that you take on cancer. Just pick one that's a big disease, affects pretty much every family throughout the country. It's a known quantity. You know how many people in the country have cancer every year. You know how much it costs to treat on average. And you can break that down by state, and you know the different kinds of cancer. So cancer is a big one. Everybody has been affected by it. And I would just suggest you start with that, because now you have a known amount of money. You have something you can actually put into a budget and say, okay, New York State, that's $11 billion. We are going to take over the payment of the treatment of cancer, $11 billion. That's a big, big number. I mean, that's an enormous number. But it's a number, and it's a number you can budget for, or you hope you can, right? The other great thing about having a number like that is you can go to the insurance companies and say, listen, we're taking $11 billion off your books. We should see that as a return in lower premiums for healthcare. I mean, that's a negotiating tool. So now you have a number and a negotiating tool. And just to give you an idea, if we had done this last time I brought this forward, right? The state budget in 2019 was $175 billion. 2020, it was $177 billion. Then it was $216 billion. And now they're talking, now this year, then it was 212, excuse me. Now it's $216 billion suggested for 2022. So that's a $41 billion increase over the course of 4 years. $11 billion. Wow, this state is apparently flush with cash that I didn't know about. Everybody complains about taxes, and yet here we are, $41 billion heavier in our tax levy. And yet they didn't adopt this again, despite having full control, despite having the ability to spend $200 $12 billion. And if they had said, yeah, we're going to just tax cancer, cancer would have been covered for the last 3 years. And people wouldn't have to worry about how they're going to pay for that. You would have probably gotten bipartisan support and something like that. Because again, cancer, everybody's been touched by that. I'm not promising that you would have, but it has a lot of elements to success in that different approach. So that's why I present the resolution yet again. And that's why I'll be voting against this again. So thank you very much.
So let me just clarify, Mike, did you want to amend this resolution or you'll vote against this one and then bring forth yours at the end?
No, I'll move for the amendment if that's okay.
Sure. Okay. Would someone like to second the amendment? Seconded by Randy Brown. And if we could have discussion on the amendment.
Can you clarify what the amendment is?
It's a replacement resolution. It's in your packet. It's member filed resolution, whatever the number is.
That would be a substitution.
It would be a substitution, yes.
Point of inquiry.
Resolution K.
Package page 45.
Point of inquiry.
Sure.
So if this amendment were to fail as a substitution, we would still be on the agenda. We would still be voting on it separately. Is that accurate?
No.
Because it's in the packet. I mean, it's here.
I'm just moving it as a replacement. You might even need, how many, I don't know, Kathy, how many votes do you need to get on? Do you need 10 as a replacement?
If you're moving this as an amendment, it needs 8 votes.
I will go that route.
And if when we get to the agenda item of individual member filed
Still
resolutions,
needs 8 votes.
you can withdraw the resolution at that time.
That'll be great. Thank you, Kathy.
Point of information. So the resolution as filed for a member file does not need to be voted on to be put on the agenda because it was filed in enough time.
That's right.
So it's already on the agenda, so we can
Right.
talk about it later after this.
Correct, if he wishes to, yes.
I don't know why you replace it.
Okay, this is comment on the amendment, which is the substituted resolution that Mike wrote. Mike Lane.
I'm really sorry to see this process right now. I don't know anything about this cancer resolution that Mike's bringing forth. I really think it ought to be discussed in a committee. There are other diseases out there. Heart disease, I think, is the biggest killer in America. And there are all kinds of things, even mental health, that we might want to think about. It's not necessarily a bad idea, but by substituting this here, if it gets voted, if the amendment fails, I would still like to see this proposal go to a committee. And I would, if we got to Mike's resolution at the end, I would have probably moved to refer it to a committee. But the process we have right now doesn't let that happen. So I'm betwixt and between on this thing, but I'm not going to support the amendment.
Thank you, Mike. Let's see here. I have Annie and then Rich.
So I'd like to talk about my older brother, Billy. He's 2 years older than me. And he was recently, just this past month, diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer, which has metastasized to his brain. And the reason that he just now has this diagnosis is because most of his life he was not able to get health insurance. That's all I want to say about that right now.
You, Annie. Rich and then Mike Sigler.
Yep, Mike, I guess I'd like to give your resolution some real thought at a committee or as a separate vote. So I don't want to support it as an amendment to what's on the floor otherwise. As to that resolution, I'm continually reminded that, I wish the United States had the economic power of name any European country that can seem to manage this, and yet we can't, and we always say it's too expensive. There is a way to do this, and it should be affordable. If we really had the political will to get it done. And the main motion, I think, sends that message. With that said, I will support the main motion with some trepidation in that we're asking New York State to administer it. And I have some skepticism about New York State government. I just don't know that they can manage the big political will and the change that would be required to implement this. This should be done on a national level. Clearly, we don't have the political will on a national level to really address the hard issues such as this. Instead, we seem to fight about very secondary issues. Anyway, I will vote against the amendment, but for the resolution. Thank you.
Okay, I was also just told by Kathy that if this amendment fails, then Mike can still bring forward his individual filed resolution. So I just wanted to make that clear. Next is Mike Sigler and then Greg.
I'll be quick. I mean, granted, there are new members on the legislature, so it is new to a number of you, but this is literally the discussion we had like 3 years ago. This is not, so I appreciate like Greg, and I know a lot of new people here. That was not, it's a competing resolution. So it wasn't like both could go to committee at the same time. I mean, I guess they could have, if that was what we could have done, but we didn't do it that way. So, or I didn't do it that way. However, with that said, I still would have brought it forward as an individual member filed resolution. So I don't feel like we've lost anything there. But again, this is not untrod ground by us. So thanks.
Okay, Greg.
Yeah, I really wrestled with this and had a lot of, I know I need to talk about the amendment. I wish you wouldn't have done the amendment because I would have liked to also talk about the resolution. And I don't think they need to be competing. I think they can go forward and let the people who are actually going to make the decision in Albany have the competitive conversation and say, if we can move the ball 2 yards, 3 yards, 4 yards, 5 yards, that's an accomplishment, right? And that's sort of where I come down to, right? If this is where we end up, with solving the cancer issue from the cost perspective, great. If we can do a lot more, which is where I hope we move the needle to, hey, even better. But I wish it wasn't always having to be competing, because I do think they can run similar tracks. And I think we get, not saying in this forum, but I think in a broader forum, we get partisan issues. And I realize that the Democrats in control haven't figured out how to get it done and do it. And that's, for them to be blamed. But I don't know. I really struggle with this. I wish you wouldn't have done it to replace, because I can't support the amendment because I do wish we move the needle further. But if we had the opportunity to move the needle a little bit, I likely would have supported that, because I think some progress is better than no progress.
Thank you, Greg. I have Leigh Sherlock, Veronica. I'm going to take a turn, and then Deborah.
I'll try to keep this short. Words Mike just used there, things we may want to think about, and some examples. And that's quite a rabbit hole for us to jump into. You've noted my aversion to resolutions in the past where we've weighed in on state and federal legislation and regulatory authority and engaging in broad public policy discussions. And it's not necessarily that disagree or don't share in your sentiment or your sentiment, Mike, but I view these resolutions and these amendments as a little bit out of my wheelhouse as a county legislator, my personal view, and I'll be voting against every one of them for the sake of consistency. Thank you.
Thank you, Leigh. Next is Veronica.
Talking about this amendment, which I guess we might talk about again if it fails and gets brought back as a resolution, and then you won't have your conflict, Greg. I will be voting against it, not for process reasons, but for content reasons. I think that the amendment and the original resolution are fundamentally different for a few reasons. One, the part of the purpose of the New York Health Act is to enable and encourage people to get preventive care, to prevent having serious diseases, whether it's cancer or whatever else. I don't really care which disease you pick, so that they are less likely to become this ill in the first place. Covering cancer care doesn't do that. In fact, something I could see happening is maybe someone has some precancerous lesions. It's like, oh, but it doesn't count as cancer, but I can't afford to treat it now, but let me just wait for it to get worse so that then the treatment for that is going to be covered. That's a disaster. That's not good, but I can imagine people doing it. Frankly, I did something slightly similar with a very, very minor like eye infection issue because I didn't have vision insurance, but I had medical insurance. So when I went to my eye appointment, but my eye was all like infected, suddenly the appointment was covered. But that's not great. That's not a system that I want. And this covering cancer care wouldn't help that. Also, I question the 11 billion number. Like you say that you hope it's a solid number, but that's changing from year to year. I admit I haven't, correct me if I'm wrong, I haven't looked this up. And finally, I wish it would work that we could put money towards some diseases and then private health insurance companies would say, well, that's great that we have to pay this much less, so we're going to charge you this much less. But point me to an example where that's happened in the past, because that's way too much faith in these for-profit companies and how they might react. And finally, Democrats aren't a monolith. So I'm just not surprised that Democrats being in control of anything didn't necessarily get things done. Unfortunately, I realize I'm speaking as one.
Thank you, Veronica. So I will not be supporting the amendment because I feel like the amendment is definitely a distraction from offering healthcare for all. I also will say that whenever I started with the county 4 years ago, 5 years ago, this was the first time my family has ever had really good insurance. Before, my family was paying almost $8,000 a year to meet our deductible. And I remember one year my wife came up to me December 22nd and said, hey, we finally met our deductible. So we had 9 days before the end of the year.
Did you go skiing or something?
Got plastic surgery. No, but on a serious note, insurance is one of those things that I think many of us take for granted, especially if you've had really good insurance at your jobs. Whenever you have kids, my kids are constantly at Convenient Care at QGMed, and we have great insurance, but it's still $150 every time we walk into the emergency room. Parents shouldn't have to worry about their kids, whether to take them into the doctors or not. I know I shared this with you guys 3 years ago. I'm going to bring it back. Whenever my daughter was 12 years old, she was diagnosed with cancer here locally, and we went to Rochester. And they sent us to Memorial Sloan Kettering for a second opinion. 5 days later, she was going through surgery, and very thankfully, it was a benign tumor. She since had another one, which was another scare for our family. But we didn't know that it wasn't cancer until they had pulled the tumor out and actually done the biopsy there in the operating room. And for me as a parent, one of the most devastating things was actually trying to figure out how in the hell I'm going to pay for Memorial Sloan Kettering. And so while it's going to be hard for me to vote against cancer, right? What schmuck is going to vote against cancer? There's so much more that's going on with our kids, with our loved ones. We talk about substance use disorder. We talk about, Mike's right, heart disease, mental health issues. I feel like if we spotlight cancer, then we're really ignoring all the other issues that people have that should be covered under healthcare for all. So I'm sure we'll probably have this exact same debate in another year or so. Look forward to it. Randy Brown.
Thank you. I appreciate this discussion, but I'm kind of in Leigh's camp here. It's important, healthcare, very important. I've dealt with all the issues everybody's talking about. But this is up to the state legislature, and it's not within our borders of the county. I think that, and I won't be supporting Mike's resolution because I think we should just focus on the one, and debate that if we need to. But I think that this county is unique and is special and is creative. I'd much rather see us focus on things we could do here in the county, free clinics to start with, or something that we could fund in some way. Because people going to emergency room is the last resort for them. If they go to clinics and they can see, kids, whoever, there's nurses in every school. There are other ways that we can tackle this issue. And I do not trust the state whatsoever to do this well.
Thank you, Randy. Deborah Dawson.
Yeah, okay, so I got a list here. I'm trying to not be triggered because I know I can be really unpleasant when I'm triggered. But I want to congratulate you, Mike. You triggered me. This notion that we should pay for cancer as an alternative to universal coverage is a strategy that opponents of universal health care have traditionally offered. We know you're hungry. We know you need a meal. Have an appetizer and go away. For that reason alone, I'm not going to support your amendment, and I won't support your freestanding resolution. One of the problems that I have with this, let's just pay for cancer thing, is I don't know, is there a concrete proposal in Albany about this, or is this just more of the, here, we'll pay for cancer, stop asking for universal health coverage? Because if there isn't a bill, if there isn't a concrete proposal, then we are indeed passing a resolution that supports absolutely nothing. And if there is a proposal, does it propose how you're going to pay that $11 billion, or are you just going to take it out of the state budget? At least universal health care, the New York Health Act, has a formula and a strategy and a mechanism to pay the costs of the insurance. Your proposal doesn't have that. And counting on insurance companies to say, as Veronica points out, oh yeah, that's great. You're going to save us $11 billion. We'll lower our premiums. It's folly. They're in it to make money. That's all they're in it for. I have had great health insurance for decades. I'm very fortunate. I have great health insurance now. I have Medicare. I have retired federal employees' health insurance, but I have to say, my husband and I also pay $700 a month for that privilege. We should keep telling Albany that we want this until they give it to us, because the insurance companies are continuing to lobby against it. And I know the Democrats control both houses of the state legislature, but they're as greedy as the next guy. And they love the money they get from health insurance companies. That's why this hasn't passed. One of the ways that we could save money with a single payer system is on administrative costs. Back when we were campaigning to get the ACA passed, the research on what it costs, the overhead that private insurance companies collect just to administer their programs is something like 20 to 25% of the premiums that people are paying. If you compare that to Medicare, a single payer system, it's less than 5%. And that's just on the premium side. If you have multiple health insurance companies that hospitals and doctors have to file claims with, that means they have to hire people who do nothing but keep track of what they have to do in order to get paid. So the dollars that people are spending on health insurance and healthcare include substantial percentages that just go to administration. You eliminate that with a single payer system. And then a final point, when people say there's more to healthcare and health insurance than cancer, Let me tell you what that looks like to a 70-year-old woman who lived through 10 years of her mother's gradual decline into complete dementia and a comatose state. It took 10 years for her to die. And it was misery and it was expensive. And I sure don't want to do that. I don't want to live through it. I don't want to do it to my loved ones. But I listen. I mean, we had Dan present to us the really sobering prospects that face people my age. Eventually, when something falls apart to the point where I can't take care of myself, I'm not going to be able to get a home health aide. And I'm not going to be able to afford $100,000 a year for a nursing home. You know, what options do I have without some kind of insurance coverage that assures me that I'm not going to end up, you know, on a filthy mattress in a cheap apartment somewhere with no help, and, you know, my teeth are rotting in my mouth, and, you know, God knows what else is going. Deaf, I'm blind, who knows? So your cancer proposal doesn't cover it as far as I'm concerned. And thank you for letting me rant.
Okay, so I just want to have a little bit of a time check-in here, because I know that no one loves going till 10 or 10:30. And we do have executive session with now 4 topics. And just a reminder that this resolution is just to urge the state, whether they listen to us or not, who knows? So remember that whenever we continue our conversation here. Let's also make sure not to have the exact same conversation if and when Mike brings his resolution forward, if this fails. So Mike, would you like to finish this off here?
I will.
Okay.
Finish what I'm saying. It's a big apple. You can't eat the whole apple. Clearly, legislators have been looking at this for 30 years and they're going, it's a big apple. You're not going to be able to eat the whole thing. So my suggestion to you would be to take a bite of the apple. And I get that there are other diseases out there. I understand. I know people with multiple sclerosis too. I know people with other diseases and heart disease. I get it. That doesn't mean that you can't start someplace and take a bite of the damn apple. But you don't want to do that because you want the whole thing. So you're not going to get the whole thing because people don't want it. They're not voting for it. They don't, because they're not voting for it. The people that you're electing to office right now aren't voting for it. So I don't know what to tell you. But this other idea, I'm sorry that you were triggered, but negotiating with healthcare companies doesn't matter. That's not a thing now, because I thought we were going to negotiate drug prices. I thought that was a thing, but we're not going to do that because it's folly apparently as well. And no, you know what? People don't believe that if the government takes it over, it's going to get cheaper somehow, because that's not been their experience over the last lifetime. That, wow, government has moved in and everything just suddenly, the administrative costs have gone away. No, they've seen whole departments grow into federal agencies that have cost billions of dollars. So no, they don't actually believe that. And as for Medicare, yeah, it's incredibly subsidized by our health insurance. That's why Medicare survives, because you're paying so much in health insurance for things. It actually, you can cut the prices for certain Medicare things that go forward, right? Of course, you're shaking your head. How do you not believe that? Our health insurance, what we pay is more, right, than Medicare. Why is that? Well, because it's subsidizing the Medicare treatment.
But when you're
And
on
wait,
Medicare,
Let Mike finish.
But then also, you were talking about someone who's a senior citizen who's supposed to be on Medicare. And you're bringing up all this imagery about people living on mattresses and filthy mattresses. I thought that was part of the beauty of Medicare, but you're saying that doesn't happen. That's something apart from it. So
Let's
kind of
vote.
which is it? So I'm sorry you were triggered by it, but I listened to your rant and a lot of it was wrong. So thank you very much.
I've had 5 years of experience on Medicare. You haven't.
True.
Mike Lane?
I'd like to call the question, please.
Second.
Okay.
That needs one.
Just one comment. Mike Sigler, okay.
It's just the amendment. You can talk to the main motion later.
Okay.
This is the vote for calling the question. Dan Klein,
Yes.
Ann Corman,
Sorry, so this is.
calling the
I'm calling
question.
the question, yes.
Mike Lane,
Yes.
Greg Mezzi,
Yes.
Veronica Piller,
Yes.
Leigh Sherlock,
Yes.
Mike Sigler,
Yes.
Travis Brooks,
Yes.
Randy Brown,
Yes.
Deborah Dawson,
Yes.
Henry Grandison. Yes. Rich John.
Yes.
Shauna Black.
Yes.
13 ayes, 0 noes.
Okay, so let's vote on the amendment. Which, by the way, is a substitution of Mike Sigler's resolution.
Dan Klein,
No.
Ann Corman,
No.
Mike Lane,
No.
Greg Mezzi,
No.
Veronica Piller,
No.
Leigh Sherlock,
No.
Mike Sigler,
Yes.
Travis Brooks,
No.
Randy Brown,
No.
Deborah Dawson,
No.
Henry Grandison,
No.
Rich John,
No.
Shauna Black.
No.
We have 1 aye, 12 noes.
Okay, so the amendment fails. We're back to the original resolution. And is there anyone that would like to speak to the original resolution that was brought forth by Veronica?
Just real briefly, because Dan acknowledged me as a writer of the original resolution, I forgot to acknowledge and thank Susan Beckley, Judy Jones, and Ruth Yarrow, who also contributed to it, and I'm grateful for their work and expertise.
Great, thank you. Any other question or comment to the original motion? I actually just wanted to know that it's been about 3 years since we've seen a prop Sigler. The last time was the paper bags. So I was glad to see the apple. Thank you for that.
Yeah,
Thanks, Sarah, for packing.
The apple's a
The
lot
apple was
easier
pretty
at the
good.
desk, Mike.
You put the bar pretty high with the apple.
He's a man to champion. when you-
That was good. That was good. Okay, any other questions? Let's vote. Roll call vote.
Dan Klein,
Yes.
Ann Corman,
Yes.
Mike Lane,
Yes.
Greg Mezzi,
Yes.
Veronica Piller,
Yes.
Leigh Sherlock,
No.
Mike Sigler,
No.
Travis Brooks,
Yes.
Randy Brown,
No.
Deborah Dawson,
Yes.
Henry Grandison,
Yes.
Rich John,
Yes.
Shauna Black.
Yes.
With 10 ayes, 3 noes.
That passes. Thank you all for that very lively debate. I always like to see a Sigler-Dawson feud. Every once in a while it comes out. It's good there was no bloodshed tonight.
All about Lansing. Come to Lansing.
If I could have thrown an apple, I would have.
Okay, moving on. Dan, did you have any other, anything else to report for HHS?
That's enough, right?
I think so.
That was enough.
Oh, boy. Okay, next, let's move to Facilities and Infrastructure Committee. Mike Lane, Chair.
Our committee has not met since our last legislature meeting. We will be meeting our regular meeting on April 21st at 9 o'clock. We are trying to schedule the first of our special meetings regarding the facilities, downtown facilities takeover. We have a tentative date for that of April 13th, but we're trying to make sure we can have a quorum.
Thank you, Mike. Greg Mezzi?
Yeah, just a quick question. I know in the beginning of the year, we were trying to reduce the number of committee meetings. And I guess the question to Mike is, how does having a meeting of a committee, which we had a subcommittee of before, a special committee, achieve the original goal set out in the beginning? Why not have that discussion at F&I? Why absorb staff time to take up in a special meeting? It seems like we're just going back to a downtown facilities committee through a special meeting of a committee.
Mike, would you like to respond?
Well, I don't know what to say. You're exactly right. I don't think that all of us said we ought to have a lot fewer committees at the beginning of, first of all. And second, I'd like to say that we discussed this at F&I, and we came to the decision to have rather than a subcommittee, to do a special committee meeting on there. And then Randy may want to speak to this also. I see his hand over there.
Yes, actually, I exchanged a few emails with Mike, and I support having a special meeting. As I started to think about this, I sat down and wrote on a piece of paper all the things that would need to happen if you truly do want to build this facility downtown. And I assume you do because you've bought the land. And I filled a piece of paper within 10 minutes. So many things have to happen. And Lisa brought up IT in probably the building that's going to get knocked down. And to change that and move that, it's going to take a lot of thought. And it's going to be a temporary move, a permanent move. How are you going to do those things? And I think that the committee needs to talk about the sequence of events is really where we need to start. So I think that's important.
Rich John?
At this special meeting, Mike, do you anticipate talking about the corner of Buffalo and Tioga, or both Buffalo and Tioga and the property farther down on Tioga?
I think we're going to start talking seriously about the space needs that we have and updating the space needs study. We also are going to be beginning to start talking, I hope, about the two buildings on the Tioga Street property. And I'm talking about the dental building and the red house there.
You are not talking, or you
Those
are?
the ones that I think we're going to start talking about. We also have an issue that we're kind of concerned about, and that would have to do with the corner of Buffalo and Tioga, and that is, what would it take to move our information technology services? And we think that that's a big thing that we have to consider as part of the space needs study.
So if, for the benefit of the residents around the dental building on Tioga Street, could you say it's April 13th and what time?
I'm saying that's a tentative time at 9 o'clock if we can get quorum.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Mike? Ann Corman?
Yeah, my recollection, at least with some of my comments at the meeting, is if we're really going to go ahead with having a special meeting, that I think if I recall correctly, there was more than myself this thought, let's have it once and really think about this if we really need it. I'd rather personally see that we devote an hour, half each meeting for F&I on this rather than having another meeting.
Yeah, I know that was your position, Ann, but you were outvoted.
Okay, so what I hear is
telling you what.
Okay.
Right.
So what I hear is that right now you all are going to have a meeting to discuss the needs and where you're headed. And then you will go from there and reassess. If there's not a whole lot to discuss moving forward, then you will keep that in F&I. If it continues to be a much bigger topic than the 2 hours that typically are allotted for F&I, then you might do a quarterly or a biannual meeting. Does that sound right, Mike?
See how it unfolds, yes.
Okay. Greg?
Is the question of this meeting the need for or the needs of, right? Because I think that those are two different questions, right? Because it seems like there was in previous legislatures, the need for was discussed, right? Because that's why it was purchased. I think some people disagreed, but to use Mike's word, some people got outvoted. And I just want to make sure that the special committee is looking at how do we achieve this? Or do we even need to achieve this? What's really the question to be answered?
I think it's all of those questions, Greg. I think what we have to remember is a lot of us supported the purchase of the properties, both further up by the 400 block of Tioga and also the corner of Court and Tioga, because of their location in the vicinity of our campus. And the fact that they'd been on our radar for many years, and the time had come that we were able to actually put together a deal to buy them, both of them. And if this had been a property 5 blocks away, we probably wouldn't even have looked at it. But it is right adjacent to our campus, the main courthouse complex, and within half a block of it. So I don't know how else to answer your question, Greg.
So
We've had space use master plan committees that have taken a whole year. I don't know whether this is going to take that kind of time, whether we will be able to come to a decision to give the county administrator the word to go ahead and build a building. We may be facing a recession. I don't know. It's not sounding too good out there right now. Is it the right time? We looked at it a few years ago, and we ended up selling the old library site. I'm sorry we did, frankly, but that's what happened. And because at that point, with the 2008 recession, we didn't feel we had the financial wherewithal to go forward to justify a new center of government building at that time. Things are a little different now. Maybe we do, but let's understand what we're doing.
So Lisa, I guess my question to you is, do we have staff that has the information that will help this committee make decisions?
Yes, though I was just looking at my calendar for the April 13th, and I know Arel, our facilities director, is out of town through the end of next week.
He's advised us of that, but there are things we can do and move forward. I'd hate to put everything over till May.
I think it was Randy. Did you have your hand up?
I did. To Greg's point, I think that decisions have to be made. And one decision that's obvious to me is you have 2 buildings that Rich just brought up. Is there any use for those buildings whatsoever for the county? Is there anything they could be used for? And is the answer yes or no? I think it's probably no, but maybe it's yes. Maybe it's a temporary location for your IT. Maybe that doesn't make sense, but if there's no use for those whatsoever, then make decisions on those things and move forward. And then you move on to the next thing. But you've got to have those decisions and discussions. So.
Great, thank you. Any other questions for Mike? Okay, thank you, Mike.
I want to say this is obviously going to continue to be an issue that we're all deeply concerned about.
Thank you. Next, Government Operations Committee. Amanda Champion is not here tonight. Vice Chair Greg Mezzi.
I wouldn't be honoring the chair if I didn't say the jewel of the legislature. We have not met since the last legislature meeting. The April meeting of government operations was canceled, and we look forward to a robust May agenda on May the 5th at noon. But nothing else to report.
Stellar job. Absolutely incredible. Any questions for Vice Chair Greg Mezzi?
Amanda prepped me, by the way.
Yeah, I bet you did. Okay. No questions for Greg. Thank you. Next is Planning, Development, and Environmental Quality Committee. Ann Corman, Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We had a very busy meeting as there are a lot of departments and liaison groups that report to us. So we were jam-packed. We went over, I think, maybe 15 minutes. But we got through quite a lot of stuff. I'll mention a few of the things that we had presentations and discussions on. We had the Ag and Farmland Protection Board. We had the Food Systems Plan. I want to note the Food Systems Plan is I might have mentioned this before, is is coming to a conclusion with their final report, and they're trying to figure out now whether the next step into having us accept their report would be to have maybe a public comment period or some type of format to get feedback from the public. Again, they have already done many things to get feedback from the public. So that's just one thing. Scott Doyle started a review of the FEMA proposed flood map updates, just a short discussion. And just wanted to say that we're gonna miss Scott, who's leaving county employment in about a month, going to Ithaca College. So we're gonna miss him quite a lot. And with the flood maps, he will be here at our next meeting, which is on the 25th of April, to talk about the flood maps more. So please come to that. I know that's been an interest for a lot of people about the new flood maps. Water Resources Council came to give their report, Environmental Management Council. Let's see what else here. Oh, the Workforce Development Board. One of the things I want to mention about that was one of the things they talked about was that people aren't necessarily leaving the workforce. A lot of people are shifting which jobs they want to do. So that will be going on, for a while, that we will see people shifting from one thing to another. And so that will continue. They're not sure for how long, but at least probably a year or two, I would think, as people reevaluate, what they're doing. And as COVID was kind of a pause for people to think about that. And also they have the opportunity to do that because we are down on the number of people that are coming out of universities and the people that are entering the workforce in certain jobs. So that was somewhat positive news. And let's see, we had a couple of resolutions. One last thing, IAED, Ithaca Area Economic Development. They are in the final stages of working on hiring somebody, a workforce person. So we're glad to hear that. And then a couple of resolutions got pulled from the consent agenda. So I can do those now if there's no questions.
Go for it.
Okay. First is resolution, this is on page 35 of the packet. Resolution F, Spring 2022 Tourism Marketing Grant Awards, ID 10779. And I so move that one.
Seconded by Greg Mezzi. And Anne, would you like to describe this resolution?
Greg, do you want to? Greg's more of an expert. He's on our STPB board.
So the tourism marketing grant, from my understanding, is done for folks who have an event or something that's going to drive the term heads in beds, right? What's going to bring folks into the county, which is then going to hopefully turn around and generate room tax. So that's what the goal really of the tourism marketing grant is how can we reach outside to bring folks within to the community for hopefully an overnight stay.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Greg or Annie?
Why was it pulled?
Sigler pulled it, probably a conflict of interest. Yep.
Okay.
I work for Park Outdoor Advertising, so these are all things that might buy advertising. I would like to sell them advertising.
Okay, any questions for Greg or Annie?
I'm just going to abstain. That's it.
I see none. Let's do a roll call.
Dan Klein.
Yes.
Ann Corman.
Yes.
Mike Lane. Greg Mezzi.
Yes.
Veronica Piller.
Yes.
Leigh Sherlock.
Yes.
Mike Sigler.
Abstain.
Travis Brooks.
I have to abstain.
Can you state you
Why?
the company? Yes.
Greater Ithaca Activity Center is one of the awardees, and that is where I work.
Good reason.
Okay, Randy Brown,
Yes.
Deborah Dawson,
Yes.
Henry Grandison,
Yes.
Rich John,
Yes.
Shauna Black.
Yes.
1, 2, 3. We have 11 ayes, 2 abstentions.
Mike?
I'd ask Bill, do you think he had to abstain there in this situation?
I believe the old Caesar theory that you have to be cleaner than Caesar's, wife. I spoke to him about this, if I remember correctly. And we went back and forth on it. And I said, probably you can recuse yourself if there's any question in
So
your
that was your
mind.
advice then. All right,
If-
thank you.
if
That's
he
all I
has
needed
a-
to hear.
If he has a feeling he shouldn't do it, then he shouldn't do it. I tell all of you, by the way.
Thank you, Bill. Thanks, Mike. Okay, next resolution, Annie?
Is on packet page 37, Resolution G. This is the Spring 2022 Community Celebration Grant Awards, ID 10780. And these are cultural local events that convey the unique culture and history of Tompkins County while enhancing life for residents and improving understanding of local culture and expanding contemporary culture in ways that are informative, educational, and just plain fun.
Okay, a seconder, please. Seconded by Greg Muzzy. And any discussion? See no hands. Let's do a roll call vote.
Dan Klein,
Yes.
Ann Corman,
Yes.
Mike Lane,
Yes.
Greg Mezzi,
Yes.
Veronica Piller,
Yes.
Leigh Sherlock,
Yes.
Mike Sigler,
Still abstaining.
Travis Brooks,
Still abstaining.
Randy Brown,
Yes.
Deborah Dawson,
Yes.
Henry Grandison,
Yes.
Rich John,
Yes.
Shauna Black.
Yes.
With 11 ayes, 2 abstentions.
Thank you. Anything else, Annie?
Our next meeting is Monday, April 25th at 1:30. We don't have the agenda yet.
Thank you, Ann. Any questions for Ann? Dan Klein?
And you mentioned the FEMA flood control map. Someone mentioned it earlier. I was trying to find them online. Anyone know where I can get them? I can't find them.
Veronica?
I do, but I don't have a way to communicate this by voice in this moment. I
Okay.
can send it to you or.
That'd be great.
whoever.
And I'm wondering if maybe it might be good to put it on the Department of Planning and Sustainability's website.
It's a very good idea, Dan. Randy Brown?
Yes, this came up in our committee meeting, and I wasn't real clear about it then. And after reading it, I'm still not clear about it. It was about the tourism funds and what the budget was originally. It got increased to 2.4 million, I think. And then they had gotten some money from the AARP, American Rescue Plan funds. Is that correct? And now they're asking to, since they got more money, $3 million this year, they want to increase their budget to 3.6 million. I read that. I was just confused by it.
Deborah Dawson had some emails back and forth clarifying something along those lines, so I'll let you.
Yeah, so.
With Scott Doyle.
I'm
sorry, with Nick Hempholt.
Yeah, with Nick Hempholt. And thank you, Nick, if you're listening, because you made a really complicated thing make sense. And I appreciate why you were confused, Randy. So basically, the county budgeted, I think, about 2.4 million of its own funds, and then another 655,000 of ARPA funds towards STPB having $3 million to spend during 2022. However, if the sales or the hotel tax receipts for 2022 are as robust as they were for 2021, they won't need the 655,000 in ARPA funds. They can just use
hotel tax revenues. They would much prefer to do that because as you know, if you use ARPA funds, it's just a mishigas of, compliance and monitoring and reporting. So that reference in the memo was to that particular aspect of their annual budget this year. It really doesn't impact the resolutions that we passed.
So that decision doesn't need to be made now.
Right.
It will be done later in the year once you understand what came in.
When they have a better sense of how the hotel tax revenues are going to go.
Okay, any other questions? Moving on to the individual member filed resolution. Resolution K. Mike Sigler, would you like to bring this forward?
Sure. So resolution in support for a new approach to healthcare coverage submitted by Legislator Sigler, ID 10830.
Okay, if I could have a seconder, please. Seconded by Randy Brown. Discussion. Mike Lane.
I think we had a lot of discussion about it. What I would like to do is move to send it to the Health and Human Services Committee for discussion. I'd like to learn more about it.
Thank you, Mike. Seconded by Ann Corman. And anyone that would like to talk to moving it to HHS for discussion. Okay, let's go ahead and vote on that.
Dan Klein,
Yes.
Ann Corman,
Yes.
Mike Lane,
Yes.
Greg Mezzi,
Yes.
Veronica Piller,
No.
Leigh Sherlock,
No.
Mike Sigler,
Yes.
Travis Brooks,
Yes.
Randy Brown,
Yes.
Deborah Dawson,
No.
Henry Granison,
No.
Rich John,
Yes.
Shauna Black,
No.
we have 8 ayes, 5 noes.
Okay, so that passes.
No.
Oh,
Well,
sorry.
the motion passes, yes.
The motion
Refer to
passes.
Bring a bushel of apples, Mike.
Okay.
Just a piece of the apple, Dan.
Bring a flippin' tree.
Congratulations. That will be on the agenda at some point for HHS. And let's move forward with our minutes of our previous meeting, March 17th, 2022. Moved by Randy Brown, seconded by Greg Mezzi. Any questions or comments or changes? Deborah Dawson?
Yeah, I just wanted to alert people that I had sent a proposed change to our clerks because I didn't suggest that we should vilify immigrants.
Okay. And that is noted. Any other questions, comments, changes? Okay, let's do a roll call for the minutes.
Dan Klein,
Yes.
Ann Corman,
Yes.
Mike Lane,
Yes.
Greg Mezzi,
Yes.
Veronica Piller,
Yes.
Leigh Sherlock,
Yes.
Mike Sigler,
Yes.
Travis Brooks,
Yes.
Randy Brown,
Yes.
Deborah Dawson,
Yes.
Henry Granison,
Yes.
Rich John,
Yes.
Shauna Black,
Yes.
13 ayes, 0 noes.
Okay, now we're going to go into executive session. We have 4 topics. 2 are for contract negotiations and 2 of the topics are for litigation. Can I have a mover? Moved by Randy, seconded by Greg, and we will not be taking action after executive session.
You have to vote.
And let's do a roll call.
Dan Klein,
Yes.
Ann Corman,
Yes.
Mike Lane,
Yes.
Greg Mezzi,
Yes.
Veronica Piller,
Yes.
Leigh Sherlock,
Yes.
Mike Sigler,
Yes.
Travis Brooks,
Yes.
Randy Brown,
Yes.
Deborah Dawson,
Yes.
Henry Granison,
Yes.
Rich John,
Yes.
Shauna Black,
Yes.
13 ayes, 0 noes.
Okay, why don't we take a 6-minute break and plan to be back at 9:30?